What is up, everybody? Welcome back. Take a seat, get comfy, because you are about to hear a sweet telling of a tale by Professor Adam. I get to sit in the front row. I don't know a lot about this topic, but as excited as you've been all week, I'm ready for this.
The pizza bomber case is, I would say, probably in the lore of like true crime stories, one of the pinnacles. And if it's not, I mean, it needs to be, because it has everything. There's a little bit of something. We're going to be talking serial killers. We're going to be talking bank robberies. We're going to be talking just police interfering with themselves on a level that pretty much pulled this out like another 7 years.
It's a delicious 7-layer dip of crime.
Yeah. It takes place in dreary Erie, Pennsylvania. A former bustling town that had kind of fallen on hard times as manufacturing left it. And Erie was a big place, but when you find out just the scope of like, this basically took place off of like literally one street in Erie, Pennsylvania, the main drag Peach Street, to fit all of this into one story, it just doesn't seem possible. And I was telling you before the episode, like, I'm still not quite sure how I'm going to go about this because there's just so much to it.
I already have in my head, like, if there was a white trash version of Guy Ritchie putting together a crime and everything, you just showed me a picture of the people, and I could see the Guy Ritchie thing where it does the freeze frame and it tells you what the person does, except everything just says either smokes meth or some other shit.
Crack.
Yeah, crack.
A lot of crack in this story, I think. So, this is going to be a hybrid. Like I say, I don't know how I'm going to attack this. I hope you guys enjoy it. I have enjoyed thoroughly studying this the entire week, and just going back to watching Evil Genius, the documentary on Netflix about it, to like remembering when the explosion from this robbery happens during the pizza bomber. It was just posted online, and I was a teenager and saw it. I was like, wow, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. In regards to how you're going to handle this, I want you to feel like you can apply the House of Pain method, and you can just jump around.
Yeah, we're going to go freeform.
You can jump around, you can jump up, and then get down.
We're going to be getting down on some wild stuff. So yeah, don't forget ratings, reviews, subscriptions, anywhere that you listen to us. 5 stars goes a heck of a long ways. Comments, anything like that you guys are putting on there, as long as it's drawing eyes and nice. I mean, honest, whatever you want to give us as far as these comments that are coming in. Mostly they're fantastic. Thank you. We love you guys for loving what we do. But the more interaction you give us on Spotify, the higher we climb on the charts, the more people we reach. And we're creating a fun little Cush College here with a lot more participants than I think we had ever really imagined. And to see those numbers every week is just fantastic.
It's motivating. Well, without making the people wait, and myself any longer, let's get into the pizza bomber. How do you want to set the stage? Do you want to introduce the cast of characters first?
We got to give just a little taste. Maybe a put you in the shoes of somebody in this bank in Erie, Pennsylvania, August 28th, 2003, around 2:30 in the afternoon. You know, you're on your day off. You're running errands. You got to go by the bank. Something that I think is kind of a lost art nowadays. Maybe you go into a bank once every 6 months.
Maybe.
Something like that. But in 2003, you're standing in line and you're waiting. All of a sudden, you hear the doors swing open, and you see a man with a white cane who looks like some sort of a reverse hunchback of Notre Dame, with just this big lump under a Guess Jeans t-shirt with the logo handwritten on it. He stands behind you in line for a second, and then you just feel him against your shoulder as he's walking straight up. You look over and you see that it's not a hump on the front of his chest, but it's a contraption. It looks like a big handcuff that's around his neck, holding a box in front of his chest. He goes up to the teller. He hands her what should be a robbery note, but you notice that this thing is 4 pages long.
It's a set of insanely detailed robbery instructions. And then someone's grandma's casserole that got...
For the bank, yes, for the bank teller. And you kind of got to look at yourself and think, is this going to be the day that I die? Is this a robbery of a bank that I might not walk out of?
Fuck, you get to the third letter or the third page of this and you're like, just fucking set it off. Just
We're on a time crunch.
Yeah.
Like, we're on a time limit for this whole story. We'll talk about that. But that guy that just walked by you, his name's Brian Wells. Brian Wells was born November 15th, 1956 in Warren, Pennsylvania. Spectacularly unspectacular is probably the best way to describe Brian. He was a decent student as a kid. When he entered middle school, his dad was diagnosed with MS. And as he kind of saw his dad start to crumble, he just really stopped caring about school. Ended up dropping out when he was 16. Probably, I have a very tough time describing Brian because I like Brian a lot. Brian was said to have maybe had some mental problems, some mental delays. Now, if you're born in 1956 and you're diagnosed as a kid, if you're diagnosed before the 70s, there's a good chance that diagnosis is probably a little off, just based upon what we know now.
What year did the movie Sling Blade come out?
Billy Bob, I want to say it was mid-90s.
Okay, because this guy has...
he's got some Billy Bob features.
He has a sling. I'm more referring to the actual character in the movie because, yeah, if you look at this guy, he does have 1996. He does have a Sling Blade-ish look about him that could suggest a possible, some mental hurdles.
I love this guy though. He was a career pizza man. That was like the one job that he had kept throughout his entire life. Seemed to be a fairly docile guy. The only real brush up with the law that he got into was after his father died when he was an adult. He went to court for a dispute with his neighbors, and the judge didn't rule in his favor, and he threatened to shoot the neighbor, or he threatened to shoot the judge.
Yeah, you can't do that. It's frowned upon.
I think it was like 30 days in jail or something like that. But other than that, he kept his nose clean. He kept to himself for the most part. He lived alone. He had 3 cats, and he lived in a cottage.
Hey, so he didn't live alone.
Yeah, I guess if you want to call it
You're
that.
You're never alone when you have your cats.
He had his fur babies.
Don't say that.
This cottage that he lived in was a house behind his landlord. Linda Payne was her name. And Linda seemed like a pretty cool lady. She went into a lot of description in the documentary about Brian, how he was a pretty soft-spoken guy. He was friendly enough and willing that he would get down on his hands and knees and play with the neighborhood dog, something like that. He had a very regimented schedule. She said one thing that she kind of noticed is whenever he would get a little antsy or a little stressed out, he would kind of start to break out into a dance. Like, he'd give it a little bit of a jig to kind of like, he couldn't
like a child that has to pee?
Yeah, like, it wasn't, that was how he got his emotions out, was just through that kind of a movement. Also said that he was a very good son. Every Sunday, he would take his mom out to a steak dinner. Whenever there was a free concert in town, he would take his mom and one of her friends out. I feel like you're setting up Brian as a sympathetic character. And he truly is. I think that he's a great guy. This next part's going to sound a little bit odd because it's just not really a phrase that anybody says. But one of the reasons that I know that he was a good guy was because he had a regular appointment with prostitutes. Like, there's people in the world that just aren't made for relationships.
Is a prostitute? Can a prostitute be like a lawyer where you're like on retainer? You have like some type of preferred customer card where you get like discounts, like a 10 punch thing.
Hey, Erie, PA prostitutes don't seem like they would have the bargain deals.
Those are some hard women.
Yeah, but the reason that I say that that's one of the reasons that I like him is because there's a lot of ways that men can go in life, and if they're unlucky in love, they can usually get angry. They usually lash out. This is something that we do see in some serial killers themselves, to where if they're shunned for most of their lives by women and then their victims become women, it becomes a bit of an issue. But Brian knew how to take care of it. We're pro-prostitution on this podcast. He found himself a working woman. He was a very good customer. There was never any violence or anything like that with these women. And he liked his kind of quiet, his friends described it as a Spartan life. And obviously being a career pizza man in 2003, his shift was from 11 a.m. to, I believe, 2 or 3 in the afternoon. So you're working 5 days a week for 3 to 4 hours. The money that you're bringing in is not, it can't be good.
I was just trying to do the math in my head. 2003, pizza wages. I'm not sure what the economic status of Erie would have been at the time.
No.
But I'm imagining if you're not working a lot of hours, like what does that prostitute look like?
I think that they were working women. They were probably tough gals.
Brian was stimulating the economy in his own way.
Yeah, but to me, I feel like Brian's the kind of guy where prostitution is around. Like, it fulfills a need so that guy doesn't go crazy and do something.
I'll knock off $15 if you bring me like some breadsticks or something.
Crack.
Yeah.
Crack is actually the key to this whole thing. But along with that, he was just the pizza place that he worked for, Mamma Mia's Pizzeria.
Hell yeah.
You can't get any more than that. And I realized that I'm such just a dirty Italian food lover that I saw pictures of this place. And I'm thinking Mamma Mia's in Erie, Pennsylvania. It is run by a guy named Tony DeTomo. So you got to think it's grandma's recipes. But I saw the front awning and it said strombolis, calzones, New York style pizza. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, God, I wonder what that food tastes like. Like, I almost wanted to try Mamma Mia's Pizzeria just by seeing the awning.
Mamma Mia's Pizzeria.
It's perfect. So yeah, Brian was just kind of a loner. He did have kind of some friends. Something that I feel like plays an underrated part in this was one of his favorite pastimes was they would do yearly key hunts in the local newspaper in Erie. And basically it would be a scavenger hunt.
Yeah.
And you would be looking for these keys. And if you got a key, it was like a couple $1,000s. Linda, his landlord, said that he came really, really close one time and he was so disappointed. But as soon as he got over it, he's like, I can't wait to go do
I
this
just love
again.
landlady Linda.
She's a sweet lady who had, unfortunately, some terrible things done to her house after this. Our second character that we will get into very deeply is a woman named Marjorie Deal Armstrong. Marjorie Deal Armstrong was born February 26, 1949. She had a pretty odd childhood as far as she was kind of an ugly duckling inside and out as a kid. Her parents had some decent money. They weren't. Her dad was an aluminum siding salesman and her mom was a teacher.
Oh, that was big in 2003. This is also her growing up. Ooh, aluminum siding. That's
in the 70s?
I was going to say,
a hot business.
that's cutting edge shit.
He was traveling too.
Oh, okay.
So yeah,
another
he
family then.
On the road. He was hoofing it. But she kind of hit a glow up in her teenage years. She becomes a fairly attractive woman. She's not my style. A lot of people say that she's just drop dead gorgeous, nice looking woman in her own right. But she was very, very smart, like super duper smart. She graduated 12th in her class of, I believe it was 306 out of high school. She graduated from Gannon University a year early, with double majors. She went to Mercyhurst University after that. I believe these are both in Pennsylvania, and achieved her master's in education. So she's just a very kind of smart woman, and you see it in a lot of these kind of different areas. But the fatal flaw was she was pretty mentally ill. She had a lot of shortcomings as far as just her impulse control and the things that she would do. It's going to become very, very apparent.
I'm getting dough and tea vibes.
her parents cut her off once they realized that she couldn't hold down a job, and anytime they would give her money, she would just absolutely waste it. They gave her money. She bought 2 houses and a piece of land and just immediately let everything go to shit.
Oh, so a lot of money.
A lot of money, yeah. She runs into some legal trouble a little bit later. She ends up getting engaged at a fairly young age, I believe it was 21, to a guy named Bill Rothstein. Bill Rothstein was a few years older, a barrel of a man who was also very smart. One of the reasons that they were attracted to each other pretty much immediately. They met at the skating rink. Of course you're going to back in that time.
Oh, yeah. All you have to do at the skating rink is have like that sweet like step over ability to turn and everything like that. And yeah, you're golden. You're the
Skate
hottest
backwards.
thing. Yeah.
You're wetting pantaloons.
Doing the things where you get down and you hold one skate out in front of you and it looks like you're sitting on the other one you're going.
Just a roll.
You'd have a slipping hazard at the skating rink if someone pulls off that move.
Bill met her intellectual desires pretty well. They were both kind of would talk about literature. Bill we'll get to in a second because he's another piece of work. They ended up getting engaged. It was just a love affair. I want to say it was within like 9 months of meeting each other. So very quickly.
Very well thought out.
Eventually things start to kind of fall apart as I think reality sets in. Marjorie's pretty deep into just struggling with her mental health, and it kind of starts to fall apart. They end up breaking up. She moves on, dates a man named Bob Thomas.
Not the Wendy's guy. That's Dave Thomas. God, I mixed him up again at some point in a previous episode. Dave Thomas. God damn it.
Dave Thomas Mandela effect.
Yep. He's everywhere now. And I want Wendy's.
Wow, shit.
Bob Thomas, sorry.
Bob ends up meeting his demise at the hands of Marjorie. She ended up walking up on him as he was laying on the couch and shot him 6 times in the back with a revolver that she had said that she had purchased 5 days earlier as a birthday present.
For him or for her?
For her. After she ends up shooting him in the back 6 times, she runs off to a friend. She has $18,000 in cash in a paper sack that she brings to her. She offers her $25,000 to help her dispose of Bob Thomas's body. The girl's like, what are you talking about? Marjorie hands her the bag and she opens it up and there's $18,000 in it. And she goes, I'll give you the rest when we're done. Girl hands the bag back, says, I have to think about it, goes and tells her mom. Her mom eventually tells the police. The police come and arrest Marjorie. She is found not mentally fit to stand trial. She's held in a facility to kind of try to bring her mental state back. This is kind of one thing that I think falls in the cracks here is when you're ruled not mentally fit to stand trial, it doesn't mean that you can't stand trial. It means that your current mental state is not adequate enough to help in the defense that your attorneys are going to put up. Once you go through treatment, if you are stabilized on your medications and things even out to the point where you're rational and you can actually, again, assist in your own defense, then you can be tried.
Okay.
So just because you're not declared mentally fit at one point.
It's at the time.
Yeah. They go through, usually it's every couple months, they'll bring them into court, they'll do a check, they'll speak to the doctors as far as how close we are into progressing to be able to start this. Eventually she does end up standing trial. And she puts on this self-defense case saying that he beat her, he yelled at her, he abused her in every single way, which comes at odds with the fact that she just said that she bought the gun for her abusive boyfriend. That seems like a bad move.
Yeah.
I mean, just thinking if somebody beats me up, I'm not going to hand him a gun. That feels like a very odd defense.
You're straying into the admission of just being like, oh, this was insanely premeditated, but it was premeditated self-defense.
Yeah. She also says that he was a very jealous person. And so she finally got sick of putting up with it. He had cut her with a knife that day, and she went and grabbed the gun and put 6 of them in his back. She's acquitted. She is acquitted for killing her her boyfriend, not her first boyfriend, Bob Thomas. She is sentenced to 15 months probation for a firearm offense for carrying a gun without a license or some shit like that. Just something awful. Her defense attorney was quoted as saying, "Working with Marge was punishment on earth." The guy that was supposed to defend her hated it so much that that's just what he said after trial. Like normally...
But was still able to get her acquitted.
Yeah. So I don't know what the burden of proof was, but it seems like it was very low for her to be able to
that
do
guy. That guy had to get a lot of business after that.
Yeah, and you got to think if you're covering up the fact that she went to somebody else and offered them $25,000 to dispose of the body, and it's a self-defense case. Like if it's self-defense, you call the police and you're like, "Hey, I was fearing for my life, so I killed this guy."
I wonder if that came out at trial.
It had to have, because her mom was the one that helped get her caught. So yeah, she gets out of that one scot-free. At this point in time, Marge is in the full-blown throes again because she's off her meds. She is out of jail. She routinely didn't shower. Like she would go 2-3 weeks without showering at some points. When they came in and they found Bob Thomas, they also realized that she was a hoarder. Like, her house was just packed with everything. She would go to food pantry places and she would pick up groceries that she said she was going to go deliver to people. And then she would just bring them back to her house and stack them up. They said that there was like a 6-foot tall, double wide stack of government cheese that was just sitting in the kitchen.
She was stealing from people who needed food?
Yeah.
This bitch is fucking evil.
Well, this is also, she shot her boyfriend.
This is to me, this is more offensive than shooting him.
So her mental illness, she ends up getting, she's diagnosed with bipolar, and there's a few other manic things that, again, I think probably are called something else nowadays. But you start to see these compulsions of hoarding coming out. General human cleanliness is something that's, I mean, you can go 5-6 days without showering, but when it becomes a noticeable issue where like you go to meet somebody and they can't even be in the same room with you, if you still don't care about it, then that's pretty odd.
Yeah.
Like there's certainly something there that's not firing correctly. Acquitted, mentally unfit. Shit, where am I? Where am I on these boards?
Richard Armstrong.
Oh, yes. Richard Armstrong, who is where Marjorie Deal Armstrong gets the Armstrong from. They end up marrying each other in the early 90s. They were together, I believe it was just under 2 years. It might have been, I think it was 20 months maybe. Brian dies of a Richard dies of a brain hemorrhage. He had apparently, the story that was told that he had fallen and hit his head on a coffee table, and that's what caused the brain hemorrhage. He was taken into the hospital, fell into a coma, and then 2 days later he ends up dying. Not a lot of questions about that. It doesn't seem like they didn't really investigate the lady that had been acquitted for her first boyfriend's murder, and now her husband falls and hits his head. And
so, like Black Widow shit. She's like a Black Widow.
A little bit.
Okay.
In a way. Except for she does stuff like after he dies, she then sued the hospital for a wrongful death claim. And after 4 years, ended up getting a $175,000 settlement. For potentially a guy that she pushed over and hit his head with something and killed him.
She's winning a lot right now.
A lot. Marge also didn't believe in banks. So this $175,000 settlement.
You don't need a bank when you can, everywhere in your house is a hiding spot.
That's true, yeah. This feels a lot like Cousin Eddie. In Vacation. In Vegas Vacation, when they're out there digging in the desert.
The jars and everything.
Yeah, they find the U-Band coffee.
He's like, how much is this? He's like, that's for when I sold my kidney. Yeah.
Yeah. This has got to be a lot like what Marge's house looks like. So these are some of the reasons that her family has cut her off from any kind of financials, because they realize that if she does have money, she's not trying to look for a job and she's out doing some hood rat shit and killing people or turning taking people to a hospital that she may have killed.
Yeah, this is one of those situations where you know you're discussing the person, you're like, this person was definitely like struggling like with some serious mental shit.
Yeah.
And you're like, and you kind of get that like, yeah, and then you list off what they did and you're just like, oh yeah, this person's just fucking crazy. Like it takes all of that even remote portion of sympathy and is just like, oh, but they're like kill people crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yep. There's no doubt, I believe, that what fueled Marge was her mental illness, but it also kind of gave her enough of a narcissistic tendency.
So basically her mental illness was how it framed her world and the rules in which her world operated. Okay.
Yep. I believe if you live in a world where bathing isn't a necessity and just hoarding, I mean, hoarding's a sad illness. It's very scary how bad that it can get and how dangerous it can get. But to just kind of go along with that and also be somebody that goes out and somebody that doesn't really have a lot of care, a lot of apathy towards killing other people.
I have what might be an unpopular take. Is it like universal karma when a hoarder, the way that they die is when they're crushed by the stacks of the shit that they're hoarding and they like can't escape?
They're essentially being crushed by their own mental illness. Like,
yes,
it finally did the job.
Yeah.
It is a killer in a way. Luckily, Marjorie finds some stability in her life as she has dated a man named James Roden for 10 years. He will also be a player in this story later. We move on to a man who we had mentioned previously, Bill Rothstein. Bill Rothstein, William Rothstein, was born January 17th, 1944, to a rich family who owned the local Coca-Cola company named Rolla-Cola. Never heard of it before. Don't think that they made it into our lifetimes. Apparently, they made some pretty damn good money, though. He grew up very well off. Pretty much the main string through his life until the robbery is he's never actually finished anything. Went off to college, decided to drop out, come back, work in the family business. Didn't really pan out in that way. But at the same time, like we were talking about the way that he met Marge, he was so smart. The dude was multilingual. He did a lot of study into literature, and he thinks of himself pretty highly. I believe they were called the Fractured Intellectuals, was the kind of think tank group that he started to meet together and discuss the problems of the day.
So going through Marge's timeline, I mean, technically when she's engaged to Bill, I'm seeing her when she like kills Bill, or sorry, when she dates Bob.
Yeah.
She's like what, in her 20s?
Mid.
Okay.
I believe.
And then you come down and then, you know, she ends up, you talk about James Roden, the guy that she dated for 10 years?
Well, yeah, their relationship ends in a very quick cutoff at 10 years.
Yeah, it's just like she's been like, this isn't someone that has just done a few things later in life. Like she's doing shit like killing people like kind of early on.
Stacked a resume.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
There's a resume building. Bill was an electrician and kind of a local handyman. He decent at his work. Definitely didn't take life too seriously. Very chill, relaxed guy. Turns out he's a hoarder too, which again, maybe that's an issue that they bonded over together, was the need to have.
It's like gravity.
More things. Together. Yeah, it was team hoarding and bonding. And who's to say that that maybe wasn't what triggered one or the other, their first relationship together?
Yeah.
Like it could have spread that way potentially. He still lived in his childhood home. He was the executor of his parents' estate. When his mother died, he was told that he had to liquidate the assets, and he would then spread the assets among
the surviving kids, brothers and sisters.
Surviving kids. The problem with that was the home that Bill was living in was the home that he had to sell. So
might be a determining factor in his decision.
Yeah, as far as that goes, his siblings were pushing at him like, hey, you got to sell the house. You got to sell the house. He does end up listing the house, and this number is going to pop up a bunch of times. This, to me, feels like a big red herring, and maybe we'll get into a little fun discussion about what this could have been. He puts the house up for $250,000 when the real assessed value that the real estate agent told him was like $83,000.
I mean, supply and demand in Erie. Who knows what that was?
Yeah, I mean, it's 100% the reason that he did it was because he could continue living in the house while it was for sale. And not a soul was going to pay $250,000 for a former hoarding house. Like, just a crazy move.
The value is in the contents of the house.
Yeah, that's true when you're cleaning it out.
Yeah, the house. Yeah, the structure. Yeah, that's definitely 80,000. But look at all this stuff that I can't possibly move that the new owner will be acquiring.
Kind of the main string throughout Bob's life is this lifelong love that he has for Marge. Anytime she calls, he's always there.
Bob or Bill?
Bill.
Okay.
Yeah, well, Bob had a lifelong love affair until she ended it by killing
that's right.
him. But Bill never really had a serious girlfriend after that. He never married. He never lived with a woman or anything. His existence was just kind of being there for Marge as a friend, as a literary crutch to talk about the latest book that they just read. For these people being so smart, it seems so odd to me the life that they live. Because, like, it just doesn't... They're very juxtaposed in the things that they do in life.
Well, I mean, she has to feel... She's definitely educated, but she also has had events happening that have to give her, like, a definite superiority complex about how she's smart because she hasn't been caught doing this kind of stuff or been convicted of doing this kind of stuff. Yeah, that's gotta boost your ego up quite a bit.
You just nailed Marge to a T. That's exactly what it is. It's her intelligence fed her mental illness to the point to where it was like when the raptors in Jurassic Park, like when you see them start to watch something and then they learn that pattern.
Yeah.
That's sort of like her intelligence is fueling her mental illness to figure out how to read people and play them.
Okay.
It's a very interesting kind of thought process that I think she had. Bill has a very important secret from everybody in this story. Nobody knows until the end. Some would say that Bill may be the smartest guy in the room. And at one point or another, maybe Bill had referenced him being the smartest guy in the room. Bill had a roommate. His name was Floyd Stockton Jr.
That's it. I love that name.
Yeah.
He sounds like a musician.
I'm not... Anybody that listens named Floyd or has somebody that they like
God
named
damn
Floyd,
it. I just read his description.
Yeah.
Never mind.
I'm sorry. Floyd shouldn't be attached to this name. Floyd is a bad guy. Floyd was on the run for raping either, I heard, a 16 or 19-year-old developmentally delayed girl in Washington. She is all the way in Erie, Pennsylvania, or he's all the way in Erie, Pennsylvania. He has a girlfriend. He is living with Bill. I'm sure Bill knew this because they were friends, and you probably talk about why he wants to live, with you all the way across the country.
What brought you out this way? What chased you out of Washington? Why would you phrase it like that? Like nothing chased me out of what made you come? Nothing. Definitely not rape.
Yeah, I didn't leave under duress. I left because I wanted to be free.
Totally my choice.
He's a part of the story that bounces in and out in ways that you just kind of see. He's a lot of like, he'll dive in, there will be a jab from him, he'll pull out clean, and he just keeps kind of coming back into the story. Marge has a friend. His name is Ken Barnes, another friend. They were fishing buddies. They met out on the pier one day, and they enjoyed fishing. Ken was a retired TV repairman that had found other forms of industry in his life. His nickname was Cocaine Ken. He gave himself this nickname, and under his job description that he explained what he was doing, he said that he sold cocaine and then just a little bit of crack.
I thought he was just maybe like hyperactive or something, but yeah, the name makes more sense now.
Like a one-stop shop. Like, if you don't have the money for cocaine, I have a couple rocks in the back.
I feel like we're building a fucking super team of degenerates and wackos.
This isn't the A team, this is the F team. And the F stands for fucked up. As this retired TV repairman that was getting money from Social Security and everything, didn't have enough to live on, so he decided to sell cocaine. He ends up selling a lot more crack in this story than cocaine. In fact, The only time I heard the word cocaine mentioned was when he said he was Cocaine Ken.
Yeah, crack Ken doesn't have the same ring to it, the same gravitas.
Truly does not. Also, a way that he supplemented his income was he would actually rent the upstairs room in his house out to the local prostitutes.
The man's an entrepreneur.
And if you will remember what I said Brian's predilection was to get his rocks off, maybe there's a connection that is starting to form.
All right. The threads are weaving.
So yeah, he would rent these rooms out of the prostitutes, and then on the way out, he would sell them crack with whatever money they got from the John. So a real one-stop shop. It's a self-sustaining ecosystem here. Ken's making money off of both ends of this deal. Pretty good deal. They also showed
water at a concert.
Yeah. They also end up showing his house when eventually they go through and raid it, and Bill's house was so gross that he had 2 dogs that they had to put down. It was so disgusting and bad inside the house. And this is a place that the prostitutes were taking their Johns to have sex. Just a wild place. It's like a white trash Narnia. He had a lot of ideas for building bombs. Had a lot of bomb-making electronics. Didn't want to build bombs. You're a TV repairman. You're going to have an extra circuit board laying around, maybe. You have the know-how of how to build a bomb. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Who knows? The next guy in this cast of characters, I don't really know how to explain. I'm going to give you all his stats, and then I'm going to tell you exactly what I know his involvement in this. His name is Rob Panetti. He was Brian's coworker, and he was bad at his job. He was a guy who showed up most of the days he was supposed to work delivering pizzas. Whereas Brian had basically a spotless record. The only time in the 10 years that he'd worked for Mama Mia's that he called in sick or he came in late was one of the days that his cats died. He still came in. Other than that, he had a sterling attendance.
Guy's a workhorse.
He was always on the job. He was always doing exactly what he needed to. He was very quick. He was very efficient. Had a good enough rapport with the people that they liked him.
I'd like it noted 36 minutes in, I'm still Team Brian. Let's see if you could fuck this up for me.
I don't think you're ever going to leave Team Brian. Rob Panetti, like I said, was bad at his job. He would routinely show up late, and sometimes he'd show up with his eyes just glassed over and just red as the devil's dick.
What are you insinuating? The timing on that was actually very...
very good. He had some drug problems. He liked drugs. He liked to get high. But one of the things that he didn't use was methadone. And that might come up important later. It might not. Who knows? I truly have no clue how Rob Panetti was involved. I'm going to have a few theories. I'm going to point some things out kind of later on about Rob Panetti. But for the life of me and all of the extra work that I put in, I saw a lot of theories. None of the shit made any sense to me. We'll talk about it in a minute, but I just do not understand why he was a part of this. But he's also not long for this world as well. Kind of the prelude, Marge becomes very angry at her father because her father had, after her mother had died, her father had gone to a PNC Bank that was in town on Peach Street, and he had gone into their lockbox, their
safety deposit
box, and cleaned everything out without telling Marjorie. Now, he had cut Marjorie off a number of years before because he realized that giving her money just fueled her insanity, basically. Once she finds out that this happened, she believes that her father stole the inheritance from when her mother died. Now, I don't exactly know how this works, but I've always assumed if you're married to somebody and you die, the living spouse gets all of their shit, right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, I guess, on the will as well, but the surviving spouse would be the executor, and then after, I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I'm sure in the context of this, I don't think I'm going to be agreeing with Marge in her outlook. Well, based on right now. Now, Marge could have a redemption arc in this that I'm not aware of, and I could be Team Marge by the end of this.
Yeah, there's a little bit more of a concave arc than a convex here.
Okay.
But Marge is full-blown in the belief that her father is whittling away the inheritance that she should have had.
Blowing it on crack house prostitutes and stuff.
Supposedly this was $1 million fortune, and she got very concerned when she heard that he had donated $100,000 to a church. He had given his mailman $1,000. He was just basically, the way that he describes it in the documentary was, he felt that he needed to do something, and what he could do was take care of the people around him that took care of him.
Makes
Seems
sense.
like a very good, altruistic guy who has a good head on his shoulders that somehow produced the demon spawn that he did.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know how, don't know why. Somehow it comes up. Ken Barnes is around. They're friends, obviously. I don't know if this comes up while they're fishing, while they're at each other's houses.
Cocaine Ken.
Yeah, Cocaine
Okay.
Ken. Sorry, excuse me, Cocaine Ken. She floats this idea of maybe he would murder her dad. And Ken immediately is like, no, I'm a crack dealer. I'm a lot of things.
I mean, I could sell him a lot of crack and maybe he'll die from that, but that's about as far as I can get involved in this.
Yeah, I'm not getting my hands any dirtier than selling him some rock. She was pretty persistent, though. She one day just said, hey, name your price. And Ken said $250,000. Again, that $250,000 number that pops up one more time. Ken says yes. Now, a lot of this story and how we're filling in these blanks is the reason that we know some of this stuff is because of confessions that come after the fact. There's a lot of people that prescribe to the idea that these people giving these confessions are trying to paint themselves in the best light possible.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about a situation like this where you have potential immunity because there's a group of people in this and they're trying to go after the mastermind of what's going on.
Yeah, everyone's looking to cut a deal to shorten their punishment and sell each other out.
They're going to sell each other out, but at the same time, if it's not something that's beneficial to them, if they throw in an extra detail that's just kind of a nonchalant throwaway, I'm almost more likely to believe that that's true. Because if they have no stake in the game and there's no reason for them to throw it in to protect themselves, there's probably a reason that they did it. And it's most likely because that's the little grain of truth that they stick to in some of these places. So, and again, I could be wrong. That could be psychologically completely inaccurate. Just reading people, that's what it seems like when you watch somebody talk. They get just that little genuine moment is usually the time when you can tell that it is. And this is something that Ken talks about as far as how they discuss things. Ken says deal. It's kind of unknown who floated this idea to rob the bank. The one thing that we do have from a confession is Floyd is given something called King for a Day. And basically what it is you go talk to investigators and they will grant you whatever you want to do that day for the limited immunity for whatever you want to tell them. So like whatever you want to get out, you can tell them. And you basically have immunity unless it's like completely implicating yourself and what happened. Lesser crimes, they're less worried
Association, stuff like that. Okay.
They're trying to get to the figurehead. Floyd says that he was the architect of this idea to rob the bank. I don't see Floyd as a real mental giant, so I'm not sure how him robbing a bank.
But he says he's the one that floated it. Okay.
He admitted to him that he was the one that did it. He also can say that because this King for a Day deal ends up getting him complete immunity.
Yeah, okay.
But luckily, because he was in jail already for the rape charge of the child, he goes back to jail after he gives it. Again, that's foreshadowing for what we'll talk about earlier. But this idea pops up to rob a bank. Marge goes to Cocaine Ken again and asks if he can make a bomb. Ken says, yeah, of course I can make a bomb. I was a former TV repairman. I know all about electronics. I can make a bomb, for sure.
Hey, who are you talking to?
Yeah, he says, I can if I wanted to, but I don't. I do have unrelated these magazines about electronics that maybe you guys could look into that would maybe describe a way to create a bomb. You're very smart. I know your friend Bill Rothstein is very smart as well. I'm sure that if you guys wanted to create this hypothetical bomb, I'm sure you could be
This is a
aided with
roadmap
this.
how to do it.
Yep, exactly. So after they get a hold of that information, it's so odd to know how Brian gets roped into this. I have multiple different kind of theories about it. I've heard a lot of different stuff. Possibly to use Brian as this patsy to rob this bank because everybody has to keep their hands clean.
Yeah.
They have a figure in mind. They know that $250,000 to rob the bank will then pay Cocaine Ken to kill the father.
Okay, so they're robbing. Okay, Marge wants to rob the bank to then pay Ken to then murder her father.
Yep.
She asked Ken to build the bomb to rob the bank so she can pay him to murder her father. Okay.
You're catching on. Yeah, you're doing well here.
She asked, so she basically asked Ken, she's like, hey, I know you're already going to murder my father for this $250K, but would you also contribute to this, bank robbery?
Got a lot of skin in this game already, brother. You got anything that'll go boom for me?
I figure for $250K, you're going to do a little extra.
Well, and that's it too. Is Ken says that he never was going to do this, and he threw out the number $250,000 because
he thought it was so out there that she wouldn't be able to do it.
And I hate to say this, I know very little about the hit game, but I think you could probably get somebody to put a hit out on your dad for less than $250,000.
I think so. In Erie, PA?
Yeah, it feels like that's attainable for a much smaller number.
Mm-hmm.
If you have $175,000 in cash sitting at your house, if you have $18,000 to go try to bribe a girl to get rid of a body for you,
here's what kind of has me lean in that same direction. Ken says $250K, she says deal, but Ken wants the money before he does it. So Ken is like, and I'm not saying that anyone in this is clean, but just from my mindset, he's like, she doesn't have $250,000. She's never going to come to me with this money. I'm never going to have to go through with this.
Well, and as a part of Ken's confession, he said that if he did receive the $250,000, instead of going to kill her father, he was going to run up to Buffalo and buy $250,000 worth of cocaine and come down and become a millionaire.
Hell yeah.
So, Ken was a very industrious man. If that
still
was
a scumbag, still fucking scumbag.
If that was the lie, that's the one that I don't want to believe was the lie, because that sounds like the funniest plan ever. Like, you just think you're going to go as a
I feel like you've been setting up this little kernel of truth build up just for this moment.
As a low-level crack dealer in Erie, PA, I don't know who's going to sell you
dream.
$250,000 worth of cocaine. And there's only so many people in Erie.
He's a man with a dream.
Yeah, he was certainly an entrepreneur. Who chose him, though? We already made the link.
Who chose Brian?
Yeah,
okay.
I had already explained to you. Ken ran essentially what was a whorehouse, and Brian was in the John industry of being on the receiving end of that. Turns out that a woman named Jessica Hoopsick was one of Ken's renters, quote unquote. She was a local prostitute. We'll talk about how they might have connected things there. This is where I put Rob Panetti in, because I feel like this is the only place that Rob Panetti can fit into this story. Were they trying to figure out how to rob the bank? They decided to use a pizza delivery guy that they would then strap the bomb to go rob the bank. Did they call in the first time they got Rob Panetti? Or did they already have Brian brought Rob Panetti in and then used Rob to basically talk Brian into this plan? There's just something there that's the only way that he fits in.
So it's either wrong place, wrong time, or he was an accomplice that was supposed to... Man, the way that you described him and everything, and I know that there's no backstory that I'm aware of, but that seems like a situation where, is he like, it could go either way. I actually think he could either be, hey, Rob, do you want $10,000 to go ahead and, like, for him, it could be, like you said, people would do stuff for much cheaper. Do you want $5,000 to go ahead and do this? Like, if he's the type of person that's just like, $5,000, yeah, sure, I'll talk this coworker into, or even like, oh, I'll send him to this address. Without knowing what's going on.
And that's the other thing, too, is Rob Panetti is so confusing to me, because they're going in for $250K. Marge needs $250K or a decent down payment to Ken to make this murder happen. So the more people that you bring in to cut off of the pie, the less money that you're going to get out of it. Not to mention, you still have Bill Rothstein floating in the background of all of this that put his house up for sale for $250,000 that still has to make those house payments.
That's why there was a 4-page note. The 4 pages were essentially explaining the breakdown of the amount of money that they needed, and so it was $250,000 money to hire hitman, and then it broke down everybody
It's
else's
the math.
cut, and it was just it was the itemized statement of what they needed the money for.
Yeah. Again, I painted Brian as the victim because he truly is the victim in this story among the other people that we will talk about that met their Bob Thomas, Armstrong, and another couple others. But I believe that Brian was a co-conspirator. I believe that you can for sure be both a co-conspirator and a victim at the same time because plans change and you can be brought in as somebody to plan as much as possible. But if you're outside of the circle of trust, call it.
So you're saying essentially that the kind of the delineation on that is you can be a co-conspirator and just simply be going along without having knowledge of the entire picture.
Mm-hmm.
You think it's going to be one thing, it's going to be another. In Brian's situation, it's like, hey, we're going to go ahead and strap this. It's not even real. It's just wired to, look fake and everything like that. We're going to send you in. You're going to actually look like the victim. So there's not going to be any of this blowback on you. We're going to get our money and everyone will be, good to go.
We'll meet up after this whole thing happens. After they clear you, they're looking for somebody else that's in the wind. We're going to give you your payout. Ken references this in kind of his partial confession as far as what Brian goes for. We talked about Brian's kind of Spartan existence and how much money he makes.
Yeah.
He was the kind of guy that he got in a car wreck and his landlord had actually fronted him the money for a new car.
Landlady Linda?
Yeah, Landlady Linda. Yep. She gave him the money. She gave him a loan for the car. He goes out and he buys a Geo Metro.
Oh, yeah.
Brings the Geo Metro home, gets on a payment plan with Linda, the landlady. He's talking to Linda one day and they're standing next to the car and he looks down and he goes, those hubcaps are too shiny on this car. It's a little too flashy for me. I think I'm going to take those off. Anybody that's ever described a Geo Metro as a little too flashy for me is probably a very solitary man who may not have the best taste in everything in life.
Including decision making.
Yeah, but if Brian is visiting prostitutes, he needs a way to pay for that.
Yeah.
He needs a way to pay Landlady Linda back, which I am pleased to report the week before he passes away, he gets Landlady Linda fully paid up. Sounds like a pretty good guy to me.
Yeah.
But Brian could be in some financial trouble. And if you're going to potentially have this $250,000 windfall and promise him that he's going to walk away as the victim in this whole story, I think you're kind of able to start getting Brian in. If you have his friend at work, Rob Panetti, who even though he was a shit worker, they still seem to get along pretty well. If you have Rob Panetti saying, hey man, you could use this money. We don't get paid a whole lot. I think that this could clear you up a little bit, maybe make your life a little bit better. You don't got to keep buying the low-end cat food for your cats. You can maybe jump up to a mid-tier with a little bit of money here.
Maybe once a week, a little fancy feast.
Yeah, so maybe that's how Rob Panetti's connected. This guy drives me fucking nuts that I can't figure out how he's in this. There was a lot of speculation, like I say, that Rob... What the fuck? Oh, that he was a co-conspirator. Like I say, I don't know how he was involved. Some of the things that led me to believe that Brian was also in on this co-conspirator. I just repeated that Rob thing twice because it still flummoxes me. But Brian was actually seen leaving by a witness, pulling out of Bill's house, Bill Rothstein's house. Mm-hmm. He had pulled out in front of somebody and cut him off, and they had seen the Geo Metro in front of the house
without the flashy wheels.
Yeah. With the more regular wheels. So there was potentially a connection there. There's a couple other things that we're going to talk about as far as what Marge says later and then what Floyd says later, that again, they're all different parts of the story. So it's not like they were all consistently like Brian was here, Brian did this, Brian was in this. They're all just sort of parts of this time segment where he's mentioned by everybody individually that makes me think that he's in it. And again, Brian is the victim in this story. You can be a co-conspirator and a victim. If everybody wants you to show up and help out, but then they're going to make you the patsy at the end, you're still the fucking victim, no matter how much conspiracy you put into this. It's just, it blows me away how all this works. There is this possible fitting that was mentioned for the actual bomb that night that he was seen leaving Bill Rothstein's house, to where there's some talk about they brought it out, they put the cuff on him, and it's literally just a big handcuff that goes around the neck that has a box that sits in front. Supposedly, when Brian tried it on, the box in front was empty, and there wasn't anything in it, and it was just to make sure that the collar would fit around his neck. I got to think you're in at that point if you're told that this is going to be a fake bomb, right?
Yeah.
Like, you got to be okay with this whole situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to try to put yourself in the mental position of how these people's thought processes work, but yeah, if you're already in at that point, you're getting nervous, they're putting something around your neck and like, look, there's nothing in it.
Yeah.
Like we're literally just going to put a cover on it. No one's going to know there's nothing in it. So don't worry about it. The cover's just not on right now.
Yeah, you just have to think that he felt like he was going to get out of this. Jim Roden, Marjorie's boyfriend for 10 years, is going to be a part of this plot as well. He's going to be one of the getaway drivers. And in his bringing into the plan as a getaway driver, starts to be concerned a couple weeks before, because he's starting to kind of get cold feet about being a part of this plan. He doesn't really want to do it. Marge is leaning on him. He doesn't quite have the constitution for it. So she gets concerned that he's going to go tell the police what's going to happen. James Roden is laying up in their bed on his face, taking himself a little nap. Marge walks up, pumps a shotgun, fires a round right in the middle of James Roden's back. Kills him pretty much instantly. Looking at the x-rays taken of him, it looks like it was probably buckshot, and it kind of came up into the back of his neck and into his head. Very close range, very gruesome. Marge then freaks out and kind of does what she's always done in life. What
have I done?
Yeah, a little less than that, I think. She was concerned. And again, they live in the middle of Erie.
Yeah.
She just fired a shotgun off in the middle of the day. Nobody knows. Because days go by before she finally decides. She's out living in her Jeep. Like, she's not even going back into the house where this just happened. She's so freaked out that she's living in her Jeep. She finally decides to call Bill Rothstein, the guy that always comes and picks up the pieces. She doesn't get a hold of Bill Rothstein, so the normal thing to do in that situation is to drive to his house and sit on his front porch until he comes home.
Of course.
When Bill gets back to his house and sees Marjorie there, she says, by Bill's admission, in his confession, he says that Marjorie was sitting on his doorstep and said, I killed James.
She's like, I did it again. Sorry.
Then she says, nobody's going to help me. You're the only one that can help me. I have $2,000 with your name on it if you come over and take care of James's body. And Bill jumps at this opportunity. You're good. Because Bill's never had a love besides Marjorie. He still feels the way that he does.
He's so smitten, kitten. He'll do anything for this woman. Tack on $2,000? Sure.
Yeah, it's a lifelong love affair. So they go back over to the house, and again, James' body has been sitting on the bed for a matter of days. I'm sure it's a very stinky experience. Inside of a hoarder's house, mind you. So we got a dead body decaying inside of a hoarder's house. Can't be a real great smell in there.
Probably not.
Bill goes up, wraps James' body in a black tarp. They carry him down the stairs. They put him in the back of Bill's van. They go out and purchase a chest freezer, and they go and put it in Bill Rothstein's garage, and they leave James Roden in the freezer. Because apparently a dead body that was killed a couple days ago is just a problem for another day when you have a bank heist that you're trying to plan.
Well, I mean, you got to kind of prioritize.
Yeah. But you can't have a dirty crime scene, so they end up going back. They scrub the place head to toe. Bill actually goes through and replaces the floorboards in the bedroom. They bleach everything out. He does some remodel work inside the house. For some reason, takes the bloody mattress over to his house and leaves it in his garage too. So the mattress where the murder happened is now sitting in the garage at Bill Rothstein's house.
With the freezer that has his body.
With the freezer that has a dead body in it. And all of the trash and debris that he pulls out of the house end up getting thrown into the back of a trailer. It was like 1,000 pounds of shit. And then driven out to the dump. Maybe potentially it's not all that. Maybe there could have been some bomb-making supplies in there. Who's to say?
Yeah.
I mean, it's all just waste, right? Who could know? After this happens and everything looks like it's just kind of okay, you've got to start moving towards this ultimate goal of making this robbery happen. And we come to that day that we started the episode with on August 28th, 2003. There's a call that comes into Mamma Mia's for 2 small pepperoni pizzas. The boss, Detomo, answers, but he can't quite understand. There's a lot of wind going on. He's having a hard time. Detomo hands the phone to Brian. Don't think this part really matters. It's just ironic that it goes to Brian. Brian writes down the directions to where he needs to go. These 2 pizzas are going to be going to this unmanned building that's right next to this local TV tower that's on Peach Street. That's 4 miles away. Peach Street again, just to roll back the curtain a little bit. Peach Street is the same street that PNC Bank is on. Peach Street is the same street that this TV tower is on. And Peach Street's going to become a very integral part of this whole story.
It's all going down on Peach Street. All right. Brian's about ready to get in this shit, and before that, let's take a bathroom break.
Go.
Oh my God, Adam. What is that up in the sky? It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's socials! Oh my God. It's faster than Instagram.
That's historically high pod on Instagram.
More powerful than X?
It's historically high, historically HI on X.
Able to leap tall threads in a single bound.
Back to historically high pod on Threads.
And, I mean, I guess there's still Gmail, right?
We got that too. That is historically high podcast at gmail.com.
All right, guys, back to the show. Okay, so the call's been made. Brian's got the pies. He's on his way to a very questionable location.
Yeah, Peach Street. 1:30 p.m. He heads out. Shifts last of the day. He works till 2, 11 to 2. You know, it's your last pie that you're taking out. As he arrives at the order, this unmanned building is back off of Peach Street. There's a long winding road that leads back. I mean, it's a TV satellite. Like it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere.
Your alarm bells don't go. Like, this is why already in this, I'm trying to kind of frame it and been like you've talked about, Brian as an accomplice, a co-conspirator to it, but not knowing all of the details about it. When you start delivering, do you say, hey, we're working the night shift out here at the television station or something? Because even just driving up to that location, you got to kind of be like, this is kind of weird.
Driving down a gravel road through the woods back to this place that I don't think anybody is.
Yeah.
So, if you're not in on this deal and you know nothing about it, that seems a little sketchy to begin with.
That's how fucking horror movies start.
Yeah. Based upon Floyd's confession and a little bit in Ken's confession, as Wells arrives, he sees, I believe it was Floyd and Panetti coming out. As Floyd and Panetti come out, they come out to greet him, say hello, and then Marge and Bill come walking out with the caller, except for this time, where the front of the caller used to be empty and there was no bomb, it is now very filled in by something that looks a lot like a bomb.
So this is being framed in this scenario here with Panetti being there because he's the other pizza guy, that he's there. So it definitely is some type of arranged meeting that this is where they're going to get everything set. But again, this is coming from sources trying to kind of go against each other and contradict. And
yeah, it's all just very interesting how this is kind of the best thing that I could piece together. And again, I'm not the only one that's come to these conclusions. There's plenty of documentaries, podcasts, everything that has. It's just trying to get it all concise. There seems to be a bit of a struggle. There's actually evidence that proves that there was a struggle at this point. Just conjecture, probably because Wells realizes that that's not the same or not the same caller that he was putting on yesterday. There's a material change in the plan. Wells is said to allegedly try to run away. Floyd and Panetti tackle him to the ground. Bill pulls a pistol out, fires a gunshot in the middle of the day, right off of Peach Street.
Well, middle of the night. Oh, 1:30 p.m.
Yeah, because he works 11 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Okay, yeah.
So we're talking middle of the afternoon, just fires a gunshot.
That's pop.
Yeah, exactly. It stops Wells. Bill and Marge walk over. They strap the bomb to him. They end up handing him 9 pages of directions for him and 4 pages of a banknote. Now, these 9 pages get handed to him because this bomb, this device that he just got strapped onto him, has 4 keyholes, 2 keyholes that work, and a 3-digit code on the front of it to unlock it.
Like the little sliding ones?
Yep. It's got 2 like sundial type kitchen timers on it.
Mm-hmm.
It is also attached to 2 6-inch pipe bombs that are now strapped to his chest. They were filled with smokeless shotgun powder. So 2 6-inch pipe bombs, I mean, that's nothing to scoff at.
No.
Those are pretty big bombs that are sitting in there. It's all encaged in this housing that has all of these red herrings on it. There's a bunch of drawings on it. There's wires sticking out. There's a blue hose that wraps all the way around it just as a decoy.
Yeah.
To make sure that nobody messes with it. And in these 9 pages of directions, Wells is told, okay, you have 60 minutes to complete this. The 2 kitchen dial timers only go up to 60 minutes, so they were actually turned to give him 10 minutes to start, so he had 70 minutes. But one of the screws had fucked up the second dial, so it wasn't turning, so all he had was 60 minutes. He thought that he had an extra 10 minutes on. When he gets into his car, he starts reading these directions on what to do. It says go down to the PNC Bank on Peach Street. We're also going to give you a white cane gun that's a shotgun that allegedly was the same weapon that was used to kill James Roden and then converted into a cane shotgun, which Marge was said to have bought a couple weeks prior to Roden being murdered with it. And when she went to buy it secondhand from these people, they said that they had never smelled a worse person in their lives. So she was...
It's not hard to pin her down in certain locations just by description.
A stinky person seems to be fairly simple.
The 9 pages of directions, the 4-page note, was all of this located as part of the gathering of evidence and everything like that? Okay.
Yeah, and these 9 pages were a scavenger hunt that Brian was going to have to go through after he gets the money from the bank. He's going to have to stop at these different points and collect clues. And along the way with the clues, he's supposed to be able to collect keys, and he's supposed to be able to collect this 3-digit code to be able to unlock it. So the only way that Brian is going to be able to get out of this situation is to go rob the bank, get the $250,000. There's parts of the notes saying after this is where you're going to drop the money off. Once we make sure that the money is correct, you will be given your next clue to be able to go on to continue to find this.
Okay, so he would be dropping off the money first.
Yeah.
So he would go, the first priority on this is going to the bank.
Yep.
After you fulfill those conditions, you're then going to drop the money off. In exchange for the money, you're going to be receiving clues in order to remove the caller.
There's a scavenger hunt that will lead you to where you need to drop the money off.
This is so confusing because looking at it from that perspective, it's like, you're likely not to get the money. Like, you're leaving so much up to delay and chance. Like, I'm trying to wrap my head. Like you said, this is fucking nuts. This shit has nuts in it. Yeah, that makes it seem like that it's fabricated, that it wasn't really something Brian had to do, because that in itself has too much of a likelihood of failure.
Well, and what better way to rub out somebody who potentially is going to be taking a piece of that pie at the end?
Or able, like, just a witness.
Yeah, I mean, you're an accomplice at that point, so being a witness, you're going to have to turn yourself in to do it. But if you promise him $10,000 to rob this bank, you don't got to pay him if you kill him. If you don't expect him to come back after he drops the money off, he kind of just becomes an unintended consequence of this whole thing. So in these 9 pages he gets for his directions, like I say, he takes off with this 4-page banknote. It's said that they stuck around and ate the pizza. I don't believe it, because they end up following him into town. Crack Ken and Marge go sit in the parking lot of, I believe it was called Eyeglass World, in this kind of strip mall that this PNC Bank was in. Bill was in his van. He was parked across the street. Everybody was keeping an eye on what was going on. Most of the time to see if this was successful, but at the same time to kind of look around and keep an eye out for police.
Yeah.
Wells ends up walking into the bank. He hangs out, as we talked about earlier, for a second. Walks up to the teller, hands the teller a 4-page note, which I can only surmise is probably 3 99/100ths of longer than what a banknote should be.
The kitchen timers, were they like egg timers that I'm thinking about, like where you turn the dial, or were they digital?
Egg timers.
Does that mean that as he's there standing in line, you hear tick, 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 tick?
He said that he could feel the ticking over his heart.
Fuck.
It was that close.
Fuck. Like, just imagine, like you were talking about at the very beginning, that person in line that's standing right there and is like, what the fuck is that ticking?
Yeah. What is this guy that just walked in with this weird cane that actually did look like a cane but was a shotgun and had this thing strapped to him? So he hands the teller the 4-page note, which is hilarious because this whole timed event, you think brevity would be key to this 60 minutes of making this happen.
You'd be reading the note and then summarizing it to the teller.
Yeah. So he hands over the note. The teller begins reading. The note, again, is 4 fucking pages, so it's impossible to go through this and have it not be boring. Basically, what it says is you need to go get the bank manager. You need to gather all of the people that have the numbers to the vault. I need $250,000 in cash. And in this note, everything is broken down in a point. So point 1, point 2, point 3, point 3, and so on. It's basically a roadmap. Anytime it comes to a situation in this note where it says, if you do not complete this, there will be retribution. It says retribution no less than, or retaliation. It says it no less than 100 times in this 4-page note. There will be retaliation for this. It goes down into one point where it says, if you do not have $250,000 in cash on hand, which is pretty insane to think that a bank would just have $250,000 in cash on hand.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not going to happen, right? Mm-hmm. It said, if you do not have sufficient funds, we will be able to take $100,000 in 50s and 20s, and we will not retaliate against your bank directly, but we will retaliate against your customers, which will cause you issues. Mm-hmm. Just a whole bunch of just wild-ass things.
This is a weird question. I'm trying to like tie stuff back into it. The PNC Bank, because I understand PNC is a chain of banks and everything. This isn't the same PNC where her father went into their... Oh, it's the same one with the safety deposit box?
Very same one.
Okay. Yeah, that turns this into like definitely like personal ties to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Marge is a very personal woman. So the teller comes back over. Part of the note, it says you have 15 minutes to complete this task. If you do not complete it, it will make sure that the robber won't have enough time to go find the rest of the clues to get this thing off of his neck. We also have a remote device. If you are to alert the authorities, we will then press the alert device. It will blow up inside your building. It will kill everybody. The remote device just happened to be a plastic cell phone, a 2003 plastic cell phone that was just glued to the side of the thing that had no capabilities to do.
Nokia brick, baby.
Yeah, there was no remote access to this thing. So the teller comes back up. She says, can't get into the vault. The manager that has it is on his lunch break. He will be back in an hour. Wells like, well, I don't have that much time. We'll all be dead at that point in time. She says, I can give you everything that's in the drawers. Wells came in looking for $250,000. She hands him over a bag that's filled with $8,702. I transposed it up there. So $8,702 is what he takes out in this bank bag. I forgot to mention, because I feel like this is sort of his psychological profile in this, is she walks away to go figure out what to do in the bank. He reaches up and pulls a lollipop out of the jar, pops it in his mouth, and he's sitting there waiting for her to come back.
Yeah.
Seems odd. Seems like something that maybe a guy that's in duress wouldn't do. But at the same time, we know that Wells is kind of a different guy if he's looking for some way to soothe himself out of this insane position. It goes back and forth
so much, yeah.
Yeah. Also, once he gets the money, he is said by witnesses to have walked out with a Charlie Chaplin-esque strut. He was spinning the bag of money. He was tapping the cane against the ground.
Boom! Goes off.
Yeah. This also sounds like something that somebody who's being forced to do something probably wouldn't do.
Yeah.
I don't believe that. I believe that this was a part of the nervous tick that landlord Linda was talking about,
Okay.
where when he had a tough time with his emotions, he would kind of start to dance and move. I think you could probably get those two things intertwined there to say maybe he was just nervous and trying
Pretty stressful situation.
Yeah, dealing with the anxiety for sure. So he runs back out to the Geo Metro. He opens up.
Oh, yeah, he's using his own car at this point.
Yeah.
Oh, does it have the Mamma Mia's thing
I
on top of it?
don't think it did.
Okay.
I don't think it did. Bad press for him if it did, because there's a lot of pictures.
Oh,
of
yeah.
it. So he runs back to the car. He opens up his note. The note says that he is to travel over to the McDonald's that is in between Glasses World and the PNC Bank. Pulls out of the parking lot, pulls into the McDonald's parking lot. He is to stop where it's the 24-hour drive-through sign. And on this note, there's actually a pretty great looking picture of what it is, like a good description. There's going to be a rock sitting underneath it. Pick up the big rock. There's going to be your next note for your next set of instructions underneath this. He goes over, he lifts up the rock. Ta-da, it's there. So maybe this is a little bit more legit because there's actually notes.
Yeah.
Like, if you were just trying to rub him out, why would you go to such trouble to leave the notes? Just let him panic? Maybe you're worried about him telling in between then?
No, that's the thing, man. Okay, here's the thing. This is planned by a crazy person.
Yep.
So I don't
Couple
know
of
if there's a way to track the logic of it going back. Like, are you trying to make this? Because everything you leave is another clue being tied back to you.
Yep.
Again, I don't know if they realize that. At the same time, are you trying to make this so believable, or is it actually happening? Like, I cannot figure this part out.
There's multiple strings to pull, and they all kind of have their own logic to them, but then they're all just completely illogical at the same time.
And the next step will contradict itself.
Yeah.
So,
sort of. So Bill gets there. Bill finds the note. The note says to head back out onto Peach Street via the through the Glasses World parking lot.
Brian.
What did I say?
Bill.
Oh, Brian. Yeah.
There's a lot of names. I think Bill is one of the names, wasn't it?
Yep.
Okay. Brian.
Yeah. Rothstein is Bill. Brian heads out of the parking lot. He goes that way via Glasses World. He has to drive back out onto Peach Street, which is the street that he just turned down from
PNC Bank.
He is to attach a piece of orange tape that is on his collar to a fire hydrant on the road to signal that he has the money. And then from there, he is supposed to drive down the highway. It is exit 180. And his next clue will be sitting off the highway exit ramp.
A lot of time going by right now, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, luckily it's all condensed because it's all kind of on Peach Street.
Yeah.
It's supposed to, from what they said, he would have enough time to do it if he doesn't dawdle. Well, unfortunately, dawdling didn't include him trying to pull out onto Peach Street and two police cruisers with their lights on pulling up behind him. And as soon as that happens, he doesn't run. They pull up, guns out. They get him out of the car.
We just literally got the report, and you're staying within 2 miles of the crime scene.
Well, and that's where, like, all of those strings that we were talking about pulling for possibilities, if you're lining him up to turn back onto the road that he just turned to get away from the PNC
You're
Bank,
keeping him in that area is what you're doing.
for long enough for the police to show up. So I don't think that this was necessarily the biggest thing, but we'll talk about kind of from their angle of what happened during this whole entire time. Maybe that's a good time to flashback now. We'll leave Brian sitting on the side of the road in front of a police cruiser in handcuffs, basically in a kneeling position with his hands behind his back in cuffs. You can see in the video the collar is hanging from his chest. He has this guest shirt over the top of it. He says, "I have a bomb. These guys kidnapped me. They put this bomb on me. They made me rob the bank. This wasn't me." The police are like, "That's probably not a real bomb." They cut open the shirt. They look at it like, fuck, that actually might be a real bomb. That could be a real bomb.
There's so much shit there, like, we can't make a determination.
Let's leave him on the road. He's sitting in front of a police cruiser. His Geo Metro's over kind of in front of him. Let's take a healthy few steps back. We'll keep our guns on him. We'll make sure that he doesn't get up. And if we flash back to Marge and Cocaine Ken and Bill, Once Marge sees that he's arrested, once she sees that the police show up, he looks at Ken and he's like, we have to go pick up the other clues. The more shit that we leave out here, the more of a chance that they're going to be able to trace this back to us.
Yep.
Of course, if you're on a stakeout, you got to have walkie-talkies. They walkie-talkie Bill. Bill comes ripping over in his van.
Because they're going to be just hanging out in the area because that's where all the other clues are. So you have this situation going on either on the street or in a park. I don't know. Does he get pulled over on the street or do they pull into a parking lot or something?
He was on the street, yeah.
So he's in front of the car. Geo Metro's there on Peach Street. And all of a sudden you have these 2 or 3 people now running around that immediate area with fucking purpose, trying to gather up all these clues while this is all going on in this just central area.
And they're trying to get there before the road gets blocked off.
Oh, yeah,
if they can't leave, they can't get anything else.
Yep.
So Marge goes balls to the wall, slams the pedal to the ground with Bill and Cocaine Ken both in the car. They end up pulling onto the freeway going the wrong way to get to 170. And there's drivers that were eyewitnesses that put Marge behind the wheel of the car, driving on the side hill of the freeway, headed to get this clue. She finally gets it righted, gets turned around, is headed the correct direction. Again, probably in a pretty manic state going on, trying to get this figured out. She ends up jumping out, grabbing what was in that clue bottle. They head off to the next one. It's said that they kind of believed that the reason they were in separate cars to begin with was what was going to happen was after that clue that they had gotten, Wells was going to meet Floyd at some point to drop the money off, and then Floyd was immediately going to hand it over to Bill, so kind of like a diversionary tactic of Floyd leaving and then handing it off to get it back. And then once they figured that out...
shell game type thing.
Yeah, exactly. They were trying to keep it in as many hands as possible to keep everybody guessing. They never end up getting it because that $8,702 is still sitting with Wells in his car. So they're ripping around to get these clues. We're going to flash back as Wells is sitting in this car just pleading with the police.
Is he in the car or is he...
Sitting in front of the car.
Okay.
The police are standing a ways back with their guns on him. He's saying, hey, we have to go find these keys. I have to get out of this thing. I work for Mamma Mia's Pizza. I left on this order. Can you please call them? And he's basically begging them to call his employment to back up his story.
Yeah.
That he took out this pizza. This was the place.
How are you not screaming at this point? This thing has a fucking timer. You can hear it ticking. I got to find these clues to get this thing off. And I'm guessing that these guys have called what accounts to either their bomb squad, whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah, bad news. Bomb squad's 10 miles away. And as they just blocked off the road, that will stop the bomb squad from getting there with any sort of haste. And right around this point in time, Bill knows that his time's becoming thin. He's just begging the police to come try to get this thing off of him, repeating, why haven't you come and tried to get this thing off of me? They said the bomb squad's coming. They're not coming. He keeps just begging and pleading with them to do anything. And they're, of course, standoffish. I mean, who's not going to be standoffish in that point?
We don't know when this thing is going to go off. We don't know if we touch this thing. If
it is real, it's going to be bad.
Yeah.
So Brian at one point says, can you at least come take the handcuffs off? This is getting heavy around my neck. I just need my hands free so I can lift it a little bit. It's putting a massive strain on my back. Police say, not a fucking chance. We're going to stay back here.
We can't come. We're not coming anywhere near you.
And then the beeping starts. It's just a beep, beep, beep. And Brian then ratchets it up a notch. Watching the videos of it, he sounds like he's pretty calm, but you can tell in his voice, like, this is a very serious, we got to get this shit going. He goes, just please go find these things. I don't know how much time I have left. It's going off now. And then you just hear beep, 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 beep. And then you get that classic silence before the explosion. It explodes wrapped around Wells's neck. And they said that the shrapnel field was 100 feet. 2 6-inch pipe bombs, I'm not exactly sure. It's not the most violent explosion you've ever seen.
I mean, and the way that you can even track that if you see a chip on a piece of glass that was in that range and everything. It means that stuff, and they probably had, looking for evidence around the entire area, but
Absolutely.
doesn't mean that it's in like a kill zone, but having it strapped to you, not a high likelihood of survival.
Yep. And most of that explosion was concentrated inward. It ended up pushing basically like a fist-sized hole into his chest. They said that it severed his heart almost immediately. He falls backwards. The police that come over towards him say that they get there long enough to just see him take his last breath and his eyes roll back and he's gone. And they're nowhere near figuring out what happened, who did this.
All this is happening depending on when they pull up. Just to kind of try to lay out a timeline. He's 1:30. He is, sent out to go ahead and deliver the pizza. At that point, after they get it strapped on him, they probably start the time right then and there and then not talk to him. They're not like, now the timer starts. Now we're going to provide you all of your instructions. And then here's the paper. It's probably, here's the stuff. Timer starts now. Go. He gets to the bank at 2:30. It's not far from the bank. So it may take him, let's just say 5-10 minutes. He's got 40 minutes left or 50 minutes left. He's going around and finding these clues.
Takes 12 minutes inside the bank.
Yep. And so as far as that goes, I mean, yeah, like it's such a condensed amount of time where they show up, they have him there. They're maybe sitting there for, like you said, the bomb squad is 10 miles away. They're probably sitting there for 20 minutes, 25 minutes with him.
Yeah, and the bomb squad ends up showing up 3 minutes after the blast happens. And, of course, them getting there to disarm that, they would have had to have been there way further. But they did say that the roads being blocked off stopped them from getting there any sooner.
Yeah.
So they were that close to having it happen. But at the same time now, the big issue comes into play. You have a murder that has to be taken care of by the state police. You have a bank robbery that has to be taken care of federally by the FBI. And you also have a bomb that has to be taken care of by the ATF.
And all this has happened within the course, as far as the cops are concerned, within the course of this 40 minutes from the time that the bank robbery was reported to this. They now have no fucking clue what's going on, the purpose of any of this, and a dead guy with a hole in his chest.
Yep. So once they clear everything, they clear his GO. They make sure there's no other bombs in that. They make sure there's no other bombs on him. When they go into the GO, they find just completely unnecessary, but I think he had 3 soft packs of Camels sitting on his front seat.
A couple fillet of fishes in the passenger side floorboard.
At one point in time, he had asked him for a cigarette, and they told him no. So seeing the cigarettes, it made sense that he was a smoker, and he was probably in a fairly stressful position at that point in time. They find the cane shotgun. They find the letter, or they find the 9 pages of notes. They start going through these notes. And I got to say, fairly intricate in the way that they did this. Apparently, they had typed up the notes, and then they had traced over it, so it hides the handwriting.
Oh, okay.
Because you're just tracing over letters, so it's not going to look like your handwriting at all. And that was mostly for the banknote, to try to hide that. The notes of instructions were more just in legible handwriting, but it's pretty distinct.
They probably didn't expect that. The fact that they expected this to work, even remotely, is beyond me.
But
they also didn't probably expect that the instructions were going to be the thing that fell into investigators' hands.
So they got a couple decisions to make. Do they go immediately search Brian's house? They end up doing that eventually. Or do you drive around to all these other locations and see if you can put the clues together and try to find out what's going on?
You have basically 2 things. The lead that you would normally follow, you would trace it back to that individual. But you were thrown this weird fucking like puzzle, curveball. Not only did you just, as those cops and the cops showing up, do you see this happen? Detectives showing up or whoever shows up quickly to try to do this. To hear the explanation from those other cops of being like, so what the fuck happened? Okay, we pulled over this guy. He matched the description in the car that robbed the bank. He had a bomb around his neck. We called the bomb squad. We stood over here. It started beeping. It ended up going off. What did he say before that? Well, he was talking about how we needed to go find these clues in order to go ahead and get the collar off. He's like, so hold on a second. He's like, so there's like, and there's a very clear cut like path for us to go follow clues to, like, what the fuck is that? Has that ever happened before where they're like, so there's a scavenger hunt to this fucking bank robbery that we now are going to go on to try to find the perpetrators? Like, detectives got to dream of that shit.
Yeah, you're salivating trying to figure out how to solve this mystery. They end up sending the FBI out to go kind of look around and check some things out. I believe there's some state troopers that go out as well to these different areas. They end up pulling up to the I-70 exit or the 180 exit. They pull off to the side of the road, exactly where the note said that was stashed under the McDonald's stuff, and they walk out. There's a Folgers container that's sitting on the side of the highway that is clearly marked with the same orange tape that they told him to stick on the hydrant.
So the clue that Marge busted ass to go get, they weren't doing the clues in order. They were just trying to go and kind of gather them in hodgepodge, kind of like however they were able to grab them. There were still clues intact enough to where the next clue was still available.
Well, that was the confusing part to me, because there's a point in time when I think it's Cocaine Ken that says they pulled over alongside the road. She said she had to go to the bathroom. She jumps out, pops the squad. Of course, you're nervous about what's going on.
Classy lady.
Yeah, you got to go do that. He says that she threw something in the trunk of the car that was wrapped in a T-shirt. What they find is a Folgers cup, or a Folgers can. Inside the Folgers can, there are still notes. So I don't know how she didn't pick up the instructions, if this was maybe another clue that they had driven to. And
it sounds to me, because the note that he would have on him, that Brian would have on him at the time, would only be the one to give him the clue for the next one.
Yeah, it's 9 pages of notes.
It is, but here's the thing. The notes didn't give him the location because he wouldn't have had to go get the clues had the instructions been in the note. I think the instructions were just laying out what he had to do. Like, go find this one. Go find this one. But the notes themselves, the clues, were what told him to go. So it sounds like what they did is they were just like, we got to go gather up these clues. But they weren't thinking in the terms of, like, not chronologically, but in order of the actual process of the clues. So, yeah, I was going to say the investigators lucked out to be able to go find the next one, because they would have had no idea where to even find that otherwise.
I believe it was one of the state troopers, I think his name was Tate, ends up driving to this location on the side of the road. It's like a band of trees, and then there's a field behind it. It's fairly shallow. They stop there. They go walking in. They see the same orange streamer. This says Vietnam, and it's sitting on this tree branch. As they pull in closer to it, they look across this field, and they see a blue van that is driving directly through to their direction through this field.
Through the field.
All of a sudden it stops when it realizes, or when whoever is in the van
focuses through the trees and sees that there's something else on the other side.
Sits there for a couple seconds, throws it in reverse, takes off down the road. Of course, they're going to have to get off the highway and get back.
Yeah, they got to line up trees. They can't just go straight through it.
He's gone. So the trooper takes that note down that they saw a blue van that was coming towards it. I don't know how the hierarchy goes. I'm assuming that there's a fair amount of hubris in law enforcement, that if something happens on a state level or in your town, whatever, the state police probably want to take credit for it. They're not too pumped when Big Brother FBI and Big Brother ATF show up to try to run the show. And probably I can't say the biggest miscarriage of justice here, because we just talked about a man dying for no reason, is the FBI, the ATF, and the state troopers just continuously don't share information with each other.
If anything, they're hindering each other.
Yeah, and it's, if they would have just put all of their pieces on the table, everybody set their nuts on the table, and they said, this is what I got. What do you got?
Everybody's trying to build a puzzle with a third of the pieces, and you flip it over, and it makes no sense because half the pieces don't connect with each other when you should just all sit down at the table together. But I think that's been a thing since the fucking invention of these different agencies.
Yeah, and it's just a shame. The FBI ends up being the ones that lead this whole investigation, And in this whole investigation, there are times that the FBI will take notes, we'll get an interview, and that'll just go back into a file. There's a point in time that we'll talk about later where there's actual prisoners that are locked up with, spoiler alert, locked up with Marge, that take very detailed notes of confessions that she tells them in jail. They go to the state troopers. The state troopers say, please pass these along to the FBI. Those notes end up in a file sitting in a desk drawer that's labeled snitch notes. Doesn't make it to the FBI until it's brought to their attention that they don't know it.
Yeah.
It's such a miscarriage of justice to get this all figured out. So after they go through, they think that they've found where all the clues were. They find empty containers in different places. They go ahead and, excuse me, get a search warrant for Brian's house. Unfortunately, they pull up behind landlady Linda's house, and not knowing what's inside a house of a guy who just had a bomb that was homemade strapped to his chest, they go ahead and blow the door off the cottage. Just a real bummer that landlord Linda's house that she rents out,
that she has to,
just got exploded.
Sorry, Linda.
As they go in, they find a fairly disheveled house, but at the same time, it's not nearly as bad as the hoarding houses that Bill and
that they're going to find later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep. No real surprises as they're going through and they're processing the scene. They find an address book that's a phone number book. There's two names, and these two names that they can't identify as far as family, anybody like that, turn out to be two prostitutes. One of the prostitutes that they investigate, they look into, because at the scene, when they asked Brian who did this to him, he said that there were 3 black guys that jumped me, of course, and they strapped this bomb around my neck and they made me do this. One of these prostitutes had a black boyfriend who was in the military who had explosives
Ordnance
training.
Expert, yeah.
Yep. So they go and immediately search that house, and the other name, fuck, I forgot her name. I think her name's Jessica. Is this Jessica woman? The same woman that
Hoop, whatever her name was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She rents rooms from Cocaine Ken. Apparently, her and Brian had a pretty close relationship as far as dough and prostitute, or John and dough, whatever you want to call it. John and a prostitute. They spent a lot of time together. She was kind of Brian's main girl. She was heavily addicted to crack, and Brian had paid her a lot of money that he potentially may not have had. There's a chance, this is something that Ken mentions, that he had run up quite a debt with the local drug dealers, I'm sure Cocaine Ken himself, in buying the crack for Jessica. So
does this also kind of lean you toward the side of like co-conspirator, again, still the victim in this situation, but of him giving that information about how he got the bomb strapped to his neck, makes me think it leans into the neighborhood of, it might be just wishful thinking, was he trying to basically, like, because he's doing this under duress while this thing's taken around his neck. Is he doing that just to try to give them some information? Is he doing that because that's part of the cover story?
Floyd had admitted that Marge told him to tell that story if he's caught.
Okay.
And I believe the only reason that he tells that story is 2 things: is he's either in duress like you're talking about, and he just repeated what she said, or he potentially thought that remote device, that cell phone that was on there, might have been a listening device, and he was concerned that they were going to blow it as soon as he tried to tell them who did it.
At that point, you don't know.
Yeah. It's all just up to a weird interpretation. So besides that address book, they really didn't find anything of note. There weren't any bomb-making materials. There wasn't anything dangerous inside this place.
There's nothing to indicate that this guy is the one that could have fabricated this, nor actually planned this or anything.
Dude never owned a computer.
Yeah.
In his entire life, he never even had a computer. So the investigation kind of goes cold. It goes nowhere because of all of these different things. But the piece of evidence that we still have is Brian Wells with a bomb attached to his neck still. In order to preserve evidence, this is a real fucking bummer, and this is another reason why Brian's a victim in this whole thing. They didn't know if The wires in the blue fluid wrapped around it was some kind of chemical weapon or something like that. So in order to preserve that, they decided that the coroner should decapitate Brian.
In order to remove the collar without triggering something else, because they maybe didn't find all the clues for the locks or the code or whatever.
Yep. They didn't tell Brian's family about it. They just went ahead and did it, and that caused them to have a closed casket funeral because you can't really pop a head up like that. It's weird listening to the coroner talk about it because you can tell how serious it was. He just kind of stumbling over his words, and he goes, I did it in the most respectful way possible.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way that you can do that in a good way. There's just absolutely none. They pull it off. They start looking through it. They find out that the fluid's just another red herring. There's no other explosive devices on it. They find the plastic cell phone. They realize that was a dummy too. But what they do get is some of the writings on there and some of there's arrows drawn on it to point to different things to where they see that there were 2 working keyholes that they had put in this and that the 3-digit lock would open with the correct lock. So if you're making this as just a decoy, why would you make it functional like that?
Yeah.
Is that...
And like I said, there's so many ways that you're going down this direction. It's I think I got it figured out, and then it goes this way, then it goes that way, then it goes this way.
And buddy, if you think that that's a this way, that way, we got to talk about September 20th. September 20th, it's time for that problem for another day to be taken care of. Old frozen Jim Roden that's hanging out in the freezer needs to go. Marge tells Bill that it's time to get rid of Roden. They collect a meat grinder and a couple other things to take care of this. Bill also admits after the Roden murder, which maybe it wasn't the shotgun, because Bill admits that after it happened, he took the weapon and he cut it down into chunks and then went and dropped it in trash cans around Erie. So this must have just been another shotgun that was around. I'm sure these people probably were had a bit of a stack of a cache of weapons. Bill's not in.
Bill, I draw the line at grinding up a corpse.
We found Bill's line. It took a very, very long time, but it turns out that we found Bill's line. Bill says, hey, I need a saw that's out in my van. I'll be right back. Bill goes ahead and fucks off and leaves.
Bill's going for cigarettes.
Bill calls the police. Bill calls 911. And Bill goes ahead and he says, hey, there's this woman in this house, 8645 Peach Street. I'm sure I got the address wrong, but it's, again, on Peach Street. She's in my house, and there is also a dead body in the or she's in the house. There's a body in the freezer in the garage. The woman on the line says, well, how do you know that? And he goes, it's my house.
She brought it over just right now. She just wheeled this freezer in. And also she brought over this mattress that's got blood all over it. It's so weird.
Bill gives a full description of what Margie's wearing. Head to toe, what color purse she's carrying and everything.
She's going to have a real shocked look on her face when you guys pull up.
He says, she's dangerous. I feel like she's going to attack me next. She admitted to me that she had murdered this guy. The dispatcher asked the logical question in this whole thing and goes, why is he at your house? Bill says, she called, she offered me some money, she needed me to get rid of it. That's just where it ended up.
We're on again, we're off again, we're on again. It's a real Ross and Rachel situation we got going on here.
Big time, yep. Bill and Marge, Ross and Rachel.
Yeah. 2
birds of a feather. So Bill's like, can you guys go arrest her? I feel unsafe. She's sitting in my house. Yeah. The dispatcher says, well, you need to come in and talk to us. He's like, yeah, no. We'll come in. I'll give a statement later. Don't worry about it. Just let's go get this psycho out of my house. Bill calls back an hour later and goes, did you get her out of my house? They said, we haven't been over there yet. We're trying to assemble a force to go over and get her. Don't worry. We'll get it taken care of. The next morning, Margie stuck around the entire night. Bill spent the night in his van. The police show up, gain entry to the house, find Margie in a very angry mood. I'm sure for being stand-up from
The
this
next morning?
cut fest. Yeah. She spent the entire night there.
That's not... Her staying there isn't what's thrown me off. The fucking police took till the next morning?
I mean, I don't know what you're... It sounds like it's not true. Like, I know you have to take everything seriously.
Yeah, I get that he's also not tying it in to being like, hey, remember that bank robbery that took place, like a little less than a month ago? But at the same time, you'd think because of that being less than a month, law enforcement would be kind of on fucking high alert and responding to whatever.
Anything. Couple weeks later, 3 weeks later, something like that, this pops up. Finally, they go in. Like I say, they meet Margie. She's ranting and raving and freaking out and telling them to leave. They're not allowed to be there. They arrest her. They search.
At this point, eyebrows or no eyebrows?
I don't think there were eyebrows at this point. Yeah, she's got a predilection for shaving off her eyebrows, which, again, ramps up the crazy factor quite a bit. If the stinkiness and the hoarding wasn't a mental illness, I got to feel like taking off both your eyebrows and not replacing them with anything is pretty nuts. She's arrested. As they're searching the house, they go out into the garage. They see this big black tarp that's hanging up. They pull back the big black tarp, and they find the freezer. They open up the freezer. They find...
What? No, don't look back there.
Frozen Jim Roden. He was actually...
It's a pro wrestler's name.
It does sound a little
Coming
bit...
from the tundra, it's Frozen Jim Roden.
Jim has been in there for so long, for weeks at this point, that he's frozen to the side of the freezer. So in order to preserve evidence, they don't just pull Jim's body out. They have to take
freezer.
The entire freezer back to the precinct. As they're searching through Bill's house, they, again, realize that Bill's a hoarder. He's got a ton of shit in there. They walk into a room, and they happen to find a suicide note. And this suicide note is very odd because the suicide note is laid out in a 1-point, 2-point, 3-point pattern. Point one of this suicide note. This doesn't have anything to do with the Brian Wells case.
Great start. Not suspicious at all.
I felt I had no choice to take my life. Jim Roden's body is in the freezer. You will find my body in the downstairs bedroom in bed. Very odd note for the police to find. But I gotta say, if point number one is this has nothing to do with the Brian Wells case, you probably didn't think this out too well.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the house that they showed up at, that was Bill's house, just happened to be right next to where the TV satellite was.
Of course.
The first house in. Within days afterwards, when they found out that Brian said that he was dropping the pizza off at the tower, they go out there and investigate. Of course, as they're investigating, they're going around and asking the neighbors if they heard anything. The media is out there. Bill has interviews with the media standing in front of his house with frozen Jim Roden's dead-ass body in his freezer inside the house, talking to the media saying that he didn't hear anything.
He had been doing... That was before, of course, all of this goes down and everything.
Yeah, this was days after Brian Wells dies.
When they're basically just interviewing anything and everything to do with the case.
Yeah.
Okay.
Trying to figure all this shit out. He's out there with a dead body in his house doing interviews, talking to the police, ruling himself out as a suspect. They're asking him what he was doing. He says that he was out doing errands when it happened. He didn't hear anything. There's some neighbors that hear a gunshot, but that's it. Didn't report the gunshot, just heard the gunshot when they're asked about it.
Those crazy kids up by the TV station.
No shit, yeah. As they're doing the investigation, again, this is just jumping back a little bit. When they go to Mamma Mia's to figure out what was going on, the caller ID, they pull the number off of for the phone from the call. They then drive to the Shell gas station where this phone call had taken place.
You didn't even star 69 that?
Nope. Also on Peach Street. Well, you're calling from the gas station. It's pretty innocuous. Yeah. So they kind of know where the call was.
Kids, when you call from the gas station, when we're referring to this, it's not like you walked into the gas station and used your cell phone or asked the guy to use the phone. There were things called pay phones. Phones that usually hung out on the outside of buildings. They took quarters and you could make a call. Or you could make a collect call, and when it says, please state your name, you would just try to give a real quick 2-second message like, come pick me up real quick.
Movie's done, come get me.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, so they used this payphone. And somehow this gas station in 2003 did not have any cameras.
Of course it didn't.
It just had, 2003, Erie, Pennsylvania. What the fuck? Why are we not doing this? So they know where the call came from. They kind of have an idea of where this area is. When they go check out the tower and they go talk to fucking Bill Rothstein, they go back in by the tower. They see prints of Wells' tires.
Mm-hmm.
His tire marks leading up. They see the patterns of his shoes imprinted in the mud. And then all of a sudden, next to that, they see this scuffle.
Yeah.
So they know that something took place, which lends credence to this idea that there was something that happened there where he was taken down that goes along with the confessions of him being held down as the bomb was strapped to him.
I like to imagine it like off The Princess Bride. I think it's like Count Rugen, or I can't remember. It's the main douchebag guy that's always like, oh, going around and like walking and being able to point out everything. He's like, there was a great battle here.
Yeah.
They fought all over the place.
How do you determine a skirmish on the ground? Like, is there just a bunch of scrape marks in the mud?
Yeah,
is there a fist print in the ground? What the fuck is it? Who knows? But they determine that something did happen there, which again lends credence to Brian's story, but also lends credence to the confessions that will then come later. It's just all so very weird. Also jumping back because I just keep flashing. As soon as I hit getting to James' body, I was like, we got to go there. But there's so much more that we have to cover. 3 days after Brian Wells dies. Again, we're in reverse. 3 days afterwards. Rob Panetti is found dead of an overdose. They had gone into Mamma Mia's the Friday after this happened. Tried to speak to the owner, trying to figure out what was going on, get it all straight. Robbo was working there, and when they started questioning him, he started to get a little squirrely. He told them that he wanted to answer their questions, but he was at work. He would schedule a meeting to come in on Monday and talk to everybody. He didn't make it to that Monday. When they pulled the talk screen, they found antidepressants in a larger amount than what he was prescribed to take, and they found methadone. Methadone is something that people who are addicted to opiates take to basically try to calm
Taper off.
Yes.
Yeah.
Calm those urges. It's also a drug itself.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't take opiates, and he had never taken methadone to anybody's knowledge. Later on, when they get the confessions from Floyd and Cocaine Ken, they said that they had helped provide Marge with the cocktail that was given to Rob Panetti that killed him. Rob had showed up back late to his house. Of course, Rob lived with his parents because he's an adult man that's a pizza delivery guy that likes to do drugs. Lives with his parents. He came home at 5 a.m. that next morning after he came home. He had said that he had spent too much time over at his sister's house and got drunk and just had to sleep it off. They find him unresponsive in his room at 5 a.m. They try to revive him. They bring him to the hospital. He ends up dying. The talk screen shows, like I say, drugs that he didn't usually take and drugs that he did take in very high amounts in his system.
Yeah.
They rule it an overdose. They don't connect it back to the fact that his coworker had just been blown up.
That's what I'm saying. How did they
before.
not connect it back to be like, hey, didn't that guy that just robbed the bank and get blown up also work at this pizza place? Yeah, it is kind of weird. And now 3 days after that, the other driver ends up dead of an overdose? Weird.
An accidental overdose.
Yeah.
But then again, who do you point the finger at?
Yeah, exactly.
You're still so far in the weeds.
And you're also looking at it like, what is this person's history? What is this person's character as far as we can identify? And it's like, oh yeah, of course he died of a drug overdose. Like that's the suspected way that somebody like this would go.
He's a drug doer.
Yeah.
That's just what happens. Never mind what it was that he had done. He was just a druggie. So of course, any drug that we find in there, he probably would have taken. It's just such an insane story of how that all works. As far as Rob going off and them kind of having this feeling of maybe it's connected, but it's not really connected. Flashback to Bill. Now we're back in the James Roden timeline. Bill gets brought in for an interview. He comes in by himself and says, I want to talk, but you're not going to read me my Miranda rights. Bill, a smart man, talking off the record, if he's never read his Miranda rights and he's interviewed.
Anything that's said during that is inadmissible as evidence, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So he goes through this first interview, this initial interview. He basically lays the story out. They
Is
grill
this
him.
pre or post selling out Marge?
This is basically when it all comes up.
Okay, gotcha.
So they ask him what happens. He goes through the story to the best of his abilities. He says that she called. He says that she showed up at the house, that she had, he goes, I don't think she used the word murdered. I don't think she used killed. I think she said shot. And they go, come on, Bill. This wasn't that long ago. You had to have known. He goes, it was a scary situation, and it would happen a longer time.
She's fucking crazy.
And that was his whole thing, was he was scared that he was going to be next. And the whole entire time, he's just focusing on her. He's minimizing his part in it. Yeah, I did go over and help. How did the body end up in your house? Well, she told me that she was going to give me this money and that we were going to go ahead and take care of it later. She came to me and she said, hey, we have to take care of this now. I wasn't going to grind this guy up.
Yeah.
So this is just where it was going to end. That's why I called you. I'm absolved of this. If anything, get me on desecration of a corpse or removing a dead body.
This is a
like
bridge
that.
too far for me. Even I have my limits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's allowed to go under his own free will because, again, he can't be charged with anything because he wasn't read his Miranda rights when he admitted any of this stuff.
He hasn't been charged with anything in regards to the fact that all that shit is at his house.
Well, they're still digging through trying to...
Oh, that's true.
trying
They
to
haven't
figure
really
everything out.
responded because
And
at the same time, it's not till the next morning or whatnot.
at this point in time, James Roden is still frozen solid.
Yeah.
Think about it this way. You go get a turkey for Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very Blake description. You get a turkey for Thanksgiving, completely frozen through. You leave it out. It takes 6-8 hours to thaw, sometimes a full day, depending on what you get and how big it is. Now think about how long it takes to thaw out a dead body.
Yeah.
Like a full-blown dead body that's been in a freezer for weeks. It takes forever. He's in a fetal position. While he's frozen, they take the x-rays. They confirm that he was shot with the shotgun. They see the spray marks in the x-rays. Once they pull him out, they get him stretched out. They do the autopsy. They confirm the cause of death. Marge gets charged with murder. Bill comes in for a second interview, does a second interview at the state police, and the FBI are looking at the situation, and they know about the suicide note, and they're like, can we take a crack at Bill? They say state police are leery at this point in time because they're focused on this Roden case, and the FBI has nothing to do with the Roden case. It's a murder, so it's state police.
Yeah.
And finally, they're like, all right, you can have some minutes with Bill. Don't worry about it. Go in, talk to him, ask him your questions. FBI investigator walks into the room. It's just him and Bill. He starts to talk. Bill goes, before you start, I just want you to know I am the smartest guy in this room.
Of course.
The FBI investigator said during the documentary that he looked over his shoulder and he realized that there was nobody else in the room. He looked back at Bill. He goes, well, Bill, my wife tells me I'm not the smartest person in the room at home all the time. So this isn't the first time that I've heard
this is
that.
not new territory for me.
Yep. Immediately starts questioning Bill kind of a little bit about Marjorie and what's going on in that case. And then they steer it towards the suicide note. And they start asking him questions about the Brian Wells case. And he starts to kind of veer off and ask his own questions and try to redirect where the interview's going.
At this point, because it's not him that wrote the suicide note.
It was.
Oh, shit, it was? I thought this was like a situation where he left the house. Marge had written that because she planned on killing him when he came back. He actually wrote the note?
In preparation, just in case anything were to happen or he were to kill himself.
Okay.
So when they bring up the note, he seems a little surprised. They start grilling him on Brian Wells. He starts trying to redirect. It gets to a point where as they're talking to him about the Brian Wells case, he just kind of starts looking at his feet and they're asking him questions and they're not really getting anything out of him. And he's just kind of starting to clam up. This interview's not going anywhere. They ask him, were you at the Shell gas station at any point in time? And why would somebody have seen you there? And he kind of perks up and he looks at him. Shell gas station is where the phone call came from.
Yeah.
And he says, yeah, I was at the Shell gas station. I don't remember making a phone call. I went in, I bought a couple things. I don't think I was ever really around the phone. I was definitely at the Shell gas station. So him knowing that the only reason that pointed question is coming is probably because somebody saw him there. He puts himself at the scene, but he doesn't put himself making the phone call potentially. So they end up letting him go. He is eventually charged with desecration of a body and doing a couple other things. he ends up saying, okay, well, I'm going to need a plea deal on this one because I'm the reason that you guys found James Roden's body.
Yeah.
Again, a completely insane fact of this is James Roden has been dead for over a month at this point in time. Nobody was asking where James was.
Yeah.
Like, there's
Friends, family, coworkers, like anything.
Nobody. The only person that asks about him turns out to be pervert Floyd. As they showed up on the day that the heist was going to go, or that the robbery was going to happen, Floyd goes, hey, where's James? And Marjorie goes, he's at home, sick in bed. I think he has the flu. He's not going to be here. We can do this without him. So Floyd is the only guy that asked where James Roden was in a matter of weeks. Just absolutely insane. Bill shows up for a pre-trial testimony at Marge's murder case, and he basically spills the beans. He tells the whole story of the James Roden murder. Says nothing of the Brian Wells case. He's still pushed himself away from that. Marge is so pissed off that she says, nobody asked Bill about his roommate. Turns out that when they go back to investigate, they find out that Floyd was living there. Floyd moved out the day after the robbery had happened. He moved in with his girlfriend to push himself away. I don't know if he thought things were too hot. Eventually, they bring Floyd in to talk to him the first time. They ask him what's going on, what he saw. He says, I was at home. I looked out the front window, and there was a cop car that was sitting out in front of the house. And I immediately turned on the TV to see what was going on. If you see a cop car sitting out in front of your house, you're probably not going to jump to that being on news.
Why are you turning on you think the camera crew's right outside your house?
Yeah.
And it's be like, we're parked outside this guy's house right now. Yeah,
And that's how he says that he finds out about the Roden case. They ask him a couple more questions. He's still kind of pushing his way through. They say, will you take a lie detector test? Floyd says, sure. Floyd passed the lie detector test about the Brian Wells case. So clearly this points out that lie detectors are shit because Floyd was highly involved in this and was somehow able to...
That's why they're not admissible as evidence, yeah.
Not great. But also it goes back to them talking to Bill, who is now in custody, saying, well, you didn't tell us that you have Floyd living in your house at this point in time. He goes, I just forgot. He didn't know anything about the body, though. He didn't know anything about James Roden. Floyd is, since he was found, I believe they said that they found him in Sacramento, maybe. So he was down in California finally. So he had made his way away from Erie. Ends up getting picked up for the rape charge. Thankfully, finally.
Yeah.
From back in Seattle. Back in Washington. He's taken back there to stand trial for that. So we come to find Big Bill's magical secret. Big Bill had stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Bill knew that he wasn't long for this world. Bill probably knew that it was finally a bridge too far for Margie, and if he could get her caught up in this, he would end up dying before he would face any repercussions for anything. I believe it was July 30th, 2004. Like a matter of weeks after he testified in the pre-trial and basically gave everything up on Margie, he ends up checking himself into a hospital. They go to try to talk to him one more time. They're asking him questions about the Wells case because he's taking it to the grave if he's not saying anything. The last question that they ask him, did you have anything to do with the Brian Wells case? He holds his hand up and he paints an NO in the air. And that was the last thing that they had talked to him. He ends up dying 60 years old of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and takes it to the grave. He never admitted anything. He never said anything else. Through everything that they were concerned and curious about, Bill ends up dying without giving himself up or anybody else around him. But he set forth a plan to ultimately just absolutely fuck Margie over right before he dies. Like, kind of poetic that he did everything he could for this woman.
So can they still use his testimony for the pretrial and everything?
Yep.
Despite the fact that he's dead.
It can still be worked. So we get to the trial, and this becomes a pretty normal theme in her life. She ends up being found not fit to stand trial in January 2005. It takes her all the way until April to be found fit. She goes, So she was found fit in 2005. She
Okay.
had spent a number of months. 2005, she takes the stand and she fires off for, I believe it was, maybe not this one. Fuck, there's so many court cases. She stands trial. She pleads guilty but mentally ill to third-degree murder of James Roden. I guess in Pennsylvania, you're allowed to plead guilty with the caveat that you were mentally ill at the time that this happened. She has this guilty plea accepted. She gets sentenced to 7 to 20 years in a facility. So a mental health facility, somewhere that she can go and get straightened back out before eventually she'll be shipped off to jail, or she stays there if she's not getting any better. So she was found fit to stand trial, but she was going back to an institution to be worked on a little bit more. And while she's sitting in there, she also can't be talked to because it's a mental institution. Yeah. You can't go and get information from somebody that's not deemed of a sound mind.
Yeah, anything that you accept from a person that's deemed not fit to stand trial is inadmissible during the trial. Yeah.
She's walking out. She knows that Bill's dead. She still says Bill should have been charged with Brian Wells' murder. Just drops it. Drops the bomb. As she's leaving, all of the court reporters catch it. It's just her one last final shot.
Without realizing that she's also incriminating herself in that?
She didn't say she did it. What she does do, though, is April 2005, she writes a "to whom it may concern" letter to the state police.
So 4 months later.
Yep. Saying that she has info on a cold case. Now they're salivating. Because what is this cold case? Is she talking about the Brian Wells case? We're 2 years removed. They're still working on it. So technically it's not a cold case, but what could it be?
Yeah. And there's other agencies that are still kind of involved in this that are just like, hey, if you're not going to pursue this, there definitely is parties that probably will.
Yeah, we just need to make this happen. And her thing is she'll give this information in exchange for being moved from Muncie back to Cambridge Springs, which is close to Erie. She said that she wanted to be closer to her money and she wanted to be closer to her law or to her defense because they're like, we're not going to keep driving out to Muncie to see you.
Muncie's so beautiful.
You got to be closer if we're going to come try to help you out. Ultimately, her cold case is that she admits that she provided the kitchen timers for the bombs to Bill Rothstein, and that if the kitchen timers were found, it was because Bill Rothstein had created this whole entire thing. She tells them that Wells was involved, which is another piece of the puzzle that she's saying. Also, the reason why I believe this is while she's doing this, while she's in Muncie for these 4 months, she's sitting around with all these other inmates and she just starts talking, just starts blabbing about everything that's going on. And there's one lady, she's an angel. I fucking forgot her name because there's a million different names. It's something along the lines of Christy, Kaylee, something like that. Takes these detailed notes. And at one point in time, Marjorie says, it's not like we didn't test it to fit on his neck before that happened, or before the thing happened. So this opens the door to potentially that night before meeting where he was spotted by the eyewitness that may have been the night that they were testing it to see how it fit around his neck. She said that without fear of anything, without fear of being prosecuted for that, does match up to the story that she tells the police. Unfortunately, as we talked about, all of these very detailed notes that these 3 women took that were in prison with her were supposed to be handed over to the FBI. They got shoved in a folder that said snitch folders, and they got put in a cabinet drawer. Just sitting there.
Yeah.
So all this very valuable information. The police thought that it was going to be something that would help, but prison snitch letters aren't exactly the most damning evidence because they're written by people that are usually trying to cut a deal.
Untrustworthy, people considered untrustworthy.
To save their own ass.
Yep.
Just something that doesn't make it to the FBI again. So after this whole thing happens, they go back and they look at it and they say, we have to search everything through Margie's the possessions that we moved out of her house, her hoarding house, into lockup, just in case we needed anything else to process this whole thing. As they're diving back through, they find a note printed out to PNC Bank. And it is CC'd, I believe, to her lawyer. It's typed up, talking about wanting to go after PNC Bank because she was very angry at them for letting her dad access the family safety deposit box without her knowing. The very same bank that Brian Wells went in and robbed. And once they have that connection, they're kind of off to the races. Now, the very interesting thing about Bill that she comes out with and says was that Bill had a blue van that was towed away from his property the day after the robbery had happened. Blue van was the one that was spotted
driving across the field,
trying to get there.
Yeah.
Once they hear about this, they go to the state police and they're like, hey, there's a blue van potentially that Bill was driving around in that he had towed away, and then he had it brought back after he was cleared. Because Bill ended up taking a lie detector test before he died, and he passed as well. The FBI officially looked at Bill and Floyd both passing these lie detector tests and ruled them out completely. There's FBI agents in the documentary that are like, we didn't all agree to this. This was just something that the heads did that were leading this case just to try to clear up a little bit, some loose ends. They go and tell the state troopers about the blue van, and the state trooper that was out there that spotted the blue van goes, yeah, no fucking shit. I told you about this when this was happening. Mm-hmm. I told you that we saw that blue van backing out, and you guys said that you would take it into evidence, and nobody listened to me.
Yeah.
So there's a link there that connects Bill directly to trying to get that through his blue van. They had also brought Ken in to just kind of give him a little bit of a run through to try to figure out
just any people that have associations with any of the people they suspect. They're just trying to find things to tie them to that.
To figure out the Roden case. Yeah. During that interview that the FBI or whoever was leading that interview, they were doing it, and Cocaine Ken says in that interview on tape that Margie had offered him $250,000 to kill her dad. And this was all the way back in 2004. And Marjorie doesn't go on trial until 2011. That's how long it takes, because they didn't realize in that interview that that was a connection and that was a link to what was going on.
Okay, so Margie ends up being found fit to stand trial January 2005. 4 months later, she writes the anonymous letter.
Yep, for the James Roden case.
For the James Roden case. At the same time, she's never released. She's just currently not standing trial.
Yeah, she's at a mental facility trying to get her leveled out on meds and everything like that. And this whole entire time, she's talking to these other inmates. Like, she's just telling everybody what's going on. Finally, when it comes time to really dig into Ken Barnes, he's not too tough to find because he's actually already in jail on some drug charges.
Of course.
They're doing some kind of light interviewing. His brother-in-law comes in and says, hey, there were some talks that Ken and I had where he had admitted to his part in the Brian Wells case to me. This is the information that I have. It starts matching up with some of the things that Margie has said about Ken as she's been interviewed. So they go ahead and pull Ken in, and Ken tells them, I want immunity for whatever I tell you. They say, we'll give you partial immunity if you tell us everything that you know. Ken says, deal. Ken goes ahead and spills the entire story implicating Margie, implicating Bill as far as the guy that made the bomb. He says that he taught Bill how to make the bomb. He didn't take part in making the bomb. Bill was the one that created everything. As they were searching through some of Bill's things, they noticed that on some of the drawings that he had in his house, he had these very distinct arrows that he would draw that matched up basically exactly to the arrows that were
on the device.
And so they confirmed Ken's story by looking at how the device was written on, comparing that to Bill's stuff. And then they hear about the stuff that Bill had taken out to the landfill and decide that that's why the bomb making equipment wasn't there, because it was then moved when James Roden was potentially shot. It all just starts to fall apart on how everything goes. Ken does end up getting partial immunity. He ends up pleading guilty to aiding and abetting. He's sentenced to 45 years in prison. He's later reduced into 22 and a half years upon completion of his testimony in Margie's case for the Brian Wells murder, backs up the Wells claims that he was in on it. He was a co-conspirator. Again, he has no skin left in the game there. He ends up dying of cancer in 2019 in prison. Nice thing for Cocaine Ken, he actually said that he really enjoyed prison. He said that it was a good time for him because it helped him get off drugs. So I guess it's a happy ending.
Silver lining, I guess.
A happy ending for a shitty person that he died sober. Also very weird, though, because Bill dies of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Ken dies of cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, cancer seems to be a story that keeps going on. We're going to wrap Floyd up. Floyd ends up being implicated by Ken Barnes after he was implicated by Margie. Bill didn't say anything about it. Floyd ends up coming clean on this king for a day. Tells him everything that he has. Ends up getting full immunity. He admits to holding Wells down while the collar was put on him, which I feel like probably shouldn't have gotten him immunity.
No
because
shit.
You're an active participant in them strapping.
Of knowing what you're doing and knowing what the end result can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they deemed that it was necessary for Floyd's testimony against Margie and then against Ken to try to wrap this whole thing up and to put names to faces.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, before the trial happens, Margie is so consistently... we'll finish up Floyd. He ends up finishing out his sentence for rape because he got the immunity for the Margie trial. He dies in 2022. For some reason, that old pervert lived far beyond his years.
Yeah, they get to do that.
Way too long. So Margie's pushing back. She's saying that she wasn't in any of these places. She doesn't know what's going on. They basically take her out on like a field trip to go walk around to all these different locations around town. Everything on Peach Street, of course. To ask her where she was that day, to walk her through or walk them through what's going on. They actually get a credible tip from a UPS driver saying that he was driving through the Shell gas station on the day of the robbery and he remembers seeing Margie standing at the payphone because he saw her eyes. And when he saw her eyes on TV, he knew that it was the same woman.
Nice.
So when they bring that up, she goes, yeah, Bill and I were here. Ken, I think, was here too, but we didn't make any phone calls or anything like that. And they go, somebody witnessed you standing next to a payphone while there was a man in overalls that was making a phone call. Turns out the man in overalls matches the description of Bill Rothstein, who wore overalls like 95% of his time. It was most of his wardrobe, and I'm sure he probably only had two pairs.
It was his look.
It's just these people keep coming forward and putting Margie in these places to where she just has no defense. But she does mount a defense. Eventually, July 29th, 2008, she's found mentally incompetent to stand trial once again. It takes until September 9th, 2010 to be found competent. So it took her 2+ years.
How does that even work? Like, obviously, while she's at this facility, she's speaking to doctors and things like that. But if she doesn't want to go to trial, she can put on an act to seem mentally incompetent, but is it that these people are so well trained that they can spot when that's occurring? They can spot the behaviors and been like, no, this person is actually they're aware enough to be manipulative about this. So we're finding them competent.
I think that she was a master manipulator, but I think it's all of the little details.
Okay.
It's all of the things that she can't hide when she needs to hide them or can't really, fire up. It's the not bathing. I don't know what the fuck her cell looked like, but I'm sure it was probably a mess. It's the random outbursts and the screaming going on. And when you look back at the letters, the fact that there was 9 pages and then there was a 4-page banknote, it's written almost exactly like she talks. Every time you hear an interview with Margie, she's always downplaying everything that she does and then bringing up everything else. But there are these little things that she put in, like the state's trying to go after a rich woman. Like, who the fuck cares if you're rich? You're clearly not that rich because you didn't have $250,000 to pay for Ken to kill your dad.
Yeah.
She's just always trying to paint herself in a really brilliant light. And some of the FBI investigators said that when they would walk in to interview her, she would just immediately start screaming at him and ranting and raving, "You motherfuckers, you get out of here, you pieces of shit," this and that. And one of the guys said that the first thing that he would do is he would look at something and he would compliment Margie and he'd be like, "Margie, your teeth look great today." He said within a couple seconds afterwards, she would immediately calm down and start talking to him. So she was just in that vanity phase that if she was able to get some sort of positive recognition or adoration for something, it would calm her down and bring her out of these spirals. And on the documentaries, if you watch, all she ever does is rant, rave, scream. When she ends up finally going on trial in September 2010, October 2010, she takes a stand in her defense. She was on the stand for 5 hours. It took 2 days for them to get her testimony out on the stand. She was bringing up every single thing that she could to try to push herself away from the scene, to try to pin it on Bill, to try to pin it on Floyd, to try to pin it on Ken. Unfortunately for her, the two guys that turned state's evidence, she was trying to pin it on them. They already had immunity deals.
Yeah.
So that wasn't going to work out too well. And you're trying to finger Bill, who's already dead.
Yeah.
So
you don't finger a dead guy.
That's definitely against the law. You think cutting up a dead guy's bad. Fingering him feels way worse. So finally, we get to November 1st, where Margie is convicted of armed bank robbery, conspiracy to commit armed bank robbery. Of course, you can't do one without the other. And then using a destructive device in a crime. She's found guilty of, I believe it was life plus 20 years or 30 years. So a good crime. There's pushback saying that the reason that she was implicating Brian is because if they could make him a co-conspirator, it would take the death penalty off for her.
Oh.
Again, I would say that that is very valid, but Floyd still brought him up. Ken still brought him up.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of these things, and when Margie wasn't worried about facing the death penalty when she was in prison telling all those inmates, she brought it up too.
Yeah.
Like, there's a number of times that it's happened just beyond what she did to kind of reinforce that he was a part of it. And again, Brian's a victim. I don't give two shits if he was a co-conspirator. If he's behind with all of these drug dealers in town and he owes a bunch of people money and he's in a desperate spot, I feel like on the hierarchy of crimes, I feel like bank robbery is so low. Like, if you get arrested and you go to jail for bank robbery, like, that sucks. You broke the law, that's what happens. It's not really on the
without hurting anybody, right?
Yeah, the worst part I see in a bank robbery is if you rob a bank without a weapon, the worst thing that you do is you traumatize everybody that you dealt with in that situation.
Yeah.
And that's fucked up, and you should go to jail and pay for that. As far as robbing a bank, if you don't do it violently, you're just an idiot.
Yeah.
It's so low on the spectrum for me, besides how shitty of a human you are to do it.
Yeah.
That's just what it is. So I can't really fault him for that. If he was trying to do good for Jessica Hoopsick and he was trying to pay off these debts because...
his perception of good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He wasn't making any money. It's a wild idea to think that a co-conspirator can be a victim, but he was 100% the victim in this. Thank heavens, 2017, Margie ends up dying of cancer while in jail too. So again, we're 3 for 4 for the Big C. And Big C is one of the worst things on the planet. I feel like it did its only redeeming job here 3 separate times. In 2018, Jessica Hoopsick actually came out and did an interview in a magazine. She said that she cared about Wells. It wasn't love, but it was still a fondness for each other.
There's some guilt there.
She does admit that she gave his name to Barnes because Barnes asked her for a pushover.
Cocaine Ken asked for someone that could be used as a patsy.
Yeah, and I gotta think that for her to come out after getting sober and finally wanting to deal with her demons, the fact that she says that she was the one that gave Barnes Wells makes me think that he was set up.
Yeah.
So even though he was a co-conspirator, he was set up because he was a good guy and he wanted to do right by her. And he wanted to get out of the debt that he'd accrued from trying to help her out to the
help her get her fix.
To where he got tricked. Yeah, I mean, there was other things. There was stories about him taking her to the grocery store and buying her food.
I think in this scenario, it's not to say that it's saying good in the sense of like in comparison to everybody else involved in here and everything, not in the sense of just saying like he was a good contributing member of like society and all that kind of stuff. He still had his shit, but there is a big separation between Marge and Brian. And the driving force for them to actually participate in this.
Yeah, and I don't really think that Wells has any negative qualities about him. He seemed like just a decent, hardworking guy that didn't quite fit the cookie cutter mold of what society looks for in a regular human being.
He definitely was not deserving of what happened to him. Yeah.
Nobody was. And just the whole wicked web that was weaved this entire episode, I hope that it makes some sense, but it's so tough to explain in reality what feels like fantasy.
It's so crazy because on the surface, this is so sloppy. This should be so open and shut in what happened to this. But because of infighting between different, law enforcement agencies, not following essentially, leads that were pretty evident, set out in front of them. And then at the same time to basically be like, okay, let's just start having everybody turn on each other and see what we can actually kick up to see if we can find out who was the mastermind behind this.
And to know that that footage of the interview with Cocaine Ken showed up where he'd said that Margie had offered him money to kill her father.
Yeah.
If that had been found any sooner and they could have just made that one-to-one connection, I mean, this could have been solved so much longer.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, to say solved is a tough word because nobody's actually been charged with the murder of Brian Wells.
Yeah.
Because all of the charges that Margie pled guilty to weren't related to Brian Wells.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, his murder is still unsolved, but it doesn't take away that this was, I believe it was described by the FBI as one of the weirdest cases that they've ever had to try to unravel.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's just, there's so many twists and turns. There's so many moving parts. And as I was selling this one to you when we were talking about doing learning episodes, we got a serial killer in Marge who has 2 confirmed bodies under her belt, definitely a third because I know that she killed her husband. And then if you put Rob Wells in that equation, that's 5 kills.
Brian Wells.
Yeah. There's a cooling down period between all 5 of them. You get a serial killer there. You get a disgusting rapist in Floyd. You get this weird love story between Bill and Margie that's like it's so toxic
that it takes chopping up a frozen body to break that bond.
Yeah. And in the end, Bill still gets to pull a fast one.
Yeah.
And that's just outside of the fact that these fuckers strapped a bomb to a guy around his neck and sent him in for a bank robbery to pull out.
And then on a scavenger hunt.
Yeah. Maybe that's a good place to end on. It does kind of seem apropos that one of the things that Brian liked doing the most was a scavenger hunt.
Yeah.
And that was unfortunately the last thing that he did on Earth.
And this is just a crazy, weird little niche gem of like American history that something this crazy and fucked up and trashy could only happen here.
Yeah, if you've ever seen the movie 30 Minutes or Less with Danny McBride and Jesse Eisenberg in it, they basically made a ripoff of this happening. And when Sony Pictures was asked about it and Jesse was asked about it, they claimed to have no knowledge of this case whatsoever.
Yeah.
And they said that there was only 1 or 2 writers that said they were vaguely familiar with this. And the whole plot in that movie is they abduct a pizza driver or delivery guy, strap a bomb to his neck and send him into a bank.
Yeah.
So clearly we're seeing a little bit of a rip. I like Jesse Eisenberg. I love Danny McBride, but it's like, you guys just call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
If you're going to open yourself up to litigation from the Wells family, you probably deserve it.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, man. That was a fucking ride.
Yeah, it feels like it was a long one. It was a fun one for me. Hopefully everybody else can decipher this. If you guys are familiar, hopefully I hit all the high notes. There's so many more things. I mean, that documentary is 4 hours. We didn't get close to 4 hours.
If there's anything I can say for certain, it's that people listening to this podcast enjoy crazy shit. And it doesn't get much crazier than this.
Yeah, this is served in spades.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us on another week, and we will catch you next time.
Peace.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for another episode. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe and like button. Follow us. If you didn't like what you heard, still hit that anyway, because we'll probably cover something in the future that you do like. Please follow us on our social media. Adam, hit them with it.
Our Instagram is historically high pod, historically high pod. And we are on Twitter at historically high. That's historically HI.
All right. And if you guys want to send in any feedback, suggestions, hit us up on those two, or you can even do it on Gmail. It's historicallyhighpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again.
Peace.